Welcome to America, suckers. We are NPCs, we are resources, we are things that are being extracted from. How do we pay for the war debts? How do we get this thing working? Our banking system is absolute and utter chaos. It's a complete shit show. Michael Saylor used to talk a lot about like Bitcoin is property, and it alleviates the problems of calling it money. We don't live in a system where you can just opt out, right? Like that's not a possibility. This is the first thing that's ever been invented by mankind in 12,000 years that is valuable and can't be stolen. Provided Bitcoin remains decentralized and secure, Bitcoin's going to transform the world. Bitcoin quite literally is unstoppable. And once it's unstoppable, it fundamentally transforms the world for the better. If you're hearing this, please, for the love of God, and you like Bitcoin, please, please, please consider running a node.
What is real? How do you define real?
You can't jump into cash. Cash is trash. What do? You get out.
Daniel White is the author of The Great Realignment, Power, Money, Greed, and Bitcoin, and the Grand Poobah at MicroSeed, the self-custody maximalists. Stamp your seed phrase on a piece of titanium the size of a washer. Then you could hide, take, or leave that thing in plain sight, and you'll be all right. Daniel White, welcome to the BitcoinMatrix podcast. How are you?
I'm wonderful. Thank you so much for having me, Cedric. It's great to be here, man. Thanks.
Yeah, I'm super excited to get into it. We're going to talk about MicroSeed. I have mine. It's pretty dope. But first, we're going to talk about this book. You also
Awesome.
we're going to talk about this book. You sent me this. It's got a really interesting title, The Great Realignment. And that kind of comes more at the end, though. But, power, money, greed, and Bitcoin. And some things within power that I don't think we really think about or talk about that much. All of these subjects kind of bring a different angle. Let's maybe talk about your background first, though. It seems like you got a wide background or varied experiences.
Yeah.
Maybe walk us through that a little bit.
Well, I'll do my best to not be dull. But yeah, I would definitely say I have a sort of unique background when it comes to things like, the history of money and writing about this kind of stuff. As I've told many people in the past, I was raised in a libertarian household. Like my dad had literally like a picture of Ayn Rand on the wall, and I think my mom used to get jealous about it. Like, who's this lady? And why, never mind. If you ever saw Ayn Rand, you'd never get jealous about her. But nevertheless, so I was very early on, I was exposed to like libertarian ideas, and he was like on the little mailing lists, and, when you'd get little like things in the mail actually, and read these little libertarian handouts and stuff. And I remember reading articles about why we need to ban the post office and, all kinds of, stuff like that. Right. So like the sort of standard small government libertarian tropes of stuff. But I, by the time I was 9 or 10, I was talking about, like the need to cut down the size of the federal government. I mean, I'm sort of parroting just what my parents was saying and stuff like that. But that was my sort of early exposure. So by the time I was in high school, I was getting exposed to people like Peter Schiff and talking about sound money. And it's one of the reasons why even to this day, like people crap on his head because he's always like dogging on Bitcoin. But I'm like, that guy is kind of like an OG, like sound money guy. Like regardless of the fact whether or not he gets Bitcoin, like he's a Bitcoin holder right now. So I go, whether you want to say he's orange pilled or not, he's collecting sats and he's sitting on them, I think. So he's just as good of a Bitcoiner as anybody else, as best I can tell, even though he makes a career out of crapping on it. But from there, I kind of continued on. I ended up working in the film and television industry in my 20s, but I stayed very active in like libertarian thinking, libertarian circles and stuff like that. I actually ran for office as a libertarian candidate in Southern California, like in the 43rd State Assembly District. Obviously I didn't do very well in that. I don't even think I should have been on that stage. Like I wasn't a very good public speaker at the time or anything, but it was sort of through all these little fits and trials that I finally ended up kind of in my late 30s. I left the film industry and went and got a law degree. And it was from the law degree, like when you start studying the law, you kind of start to see some of the holes in the libertarian logic about things. And when I say libertarian, by the time I was in my 20s, I was probably more like one of these sovereign citizen kind of guys than anything else. Like I was really deep down in the weeds. But when you kind of study the law, and the beauty of the law is it's a history lesson, right? And it's a history that's been well documented. Like unlike most historical accounts of things where it's like a third person relating things that they read about or heard about or maybe saw or not, and then putting their biases and things in there. The law is a history, and especially in the common law and the English common law, it goes back 1,000 years to the Magna Carta. But you can read cases from 1400 that they talk about like two people in conflict and how they resolve that conflict and why. And so it's very, very well documented historical accounts of like how people resolve conflict is basically what it boils down to. But it also shows you like just how deep the nuance is when it comes to these conversations. People say, oh, we need to ban this or do that or pass this law or don't pass that law. And I go, like in my mind, I always hear that sort of like there's so many ripples that flow from this and like third order effects, fourth order effects. And I think most people kind of stop at first or second order effects of things. They just go, well, if we do this, then this is going to fix this, but they don't see all the unintended consequences and things like that. But my law degree was, for lack of a better term, was kind of like a ding dong degree. Like it was basically like going to like Better Call Saul law school, like I wasn't going to Harvard or Stanford or anything like that. And so when I finished up with that, I thought, well, you know what? I should probably polish this degree up a little bit. And so I went and did a Master of Laws down at the Thomas Jefferson School of Law down in San Diego. And at the time, it was at least a reputable school. Now it's even that one's sort of fallen into disrepute. So now I've got like strike one, strike two on my law school ding dong degrees. But I was very fortunate when I got to Thomas Jefferson that like all these little thoughts and ideas that I've been percolating around in my head for the last, up to that point, 40 years. Started coming out like in my legal research. And I had a law professor that said, hey, you should consider like trying to publish like an article in one of these law reviews because you're a good writer, man. I said, okay, cool. I'll give it a shot. And he kind of told me a story. He said, my first law review article I got published, I submitted to like 100 journals. I got turned down for every single one of them. Then I wrote another article, submitted it to 100 journals. And then I got accepted after like 98 rejections. And then he went back and resubmitted. So for me, I came out and like my first article that I wrote, I submitted and I got published like 2 months later. And I went and told him like, hey, they published my article. And he's like, oh, that's great. Like, how cool for you. And then I wrote another one and that got published right away. And you could kind of see that little look of just like, you got to be shitting me, buddy. Like, where are you coming from? So with that, I found that I had this penchant for research and a lot of those papers that I wrote, like I wrote a 4-part series for the Banking Law Journal. It was about anti-money laundering regulation. But all the articles I wrote for the law reviews would always entail like a deep historical analysis. And I think that's one of the things that made them stand out when it came to the review process. Because I would go back, like I wrote a paper on bankruptcy law. I went all the way back to like, where did bankruptcy come from? Why are we talking about this kind of stuff? Where do these ideas come from? And that's sort of always my basis. And it was the same thing with the money laundering series that I did for the Banking Law Journal. And from all that publishing, I went and I thought, this is all kind of interesting, but I don't really want to be a lawyer, but I really do enjoy this research thing. So I applied to the London School of Economics. I originally applied as a international political economy student. And when I got to the school, like all these, they were, developmental economics courses, like in the third world kind of thing that I was super, super interested in learning about. And they weren't on offer when I got there, but there was a guy running a criminology program that was, criminal justice program basically. And so I switched majors and then went there, but then I ended up publishing a bunch of papers while I was at the LSE as well. So through it all, I just ended up with this kind of like deep research background that I found like I kind of took to like a duck to water. But when it came time to write the book, I thought, man, I got all this stuff just floating around my head, and I would hear these arguments and people and very, very brilliant thinkers like Lynn Alden would come out and she's absolutely astonishing just in her depth of knowledge and how she presents ideas and things like that. But even still, there's like, she'll say stuff and I'm just like, that's just not right. At the risk of like incurring the wrath of the gods of the brilliant people of the world, I go, there are some things that I think people overlook. And I was trying to kind of tackle that because at the end of all of this, my sort of thesis about like why Bitcoin is important is I think it aligns with most people that are into Bitcoin, but there's enough nuance in there that I think it distinguishes it. But I think that historical analysis sort of informs that a lot and very, very has me with a very, very deep conviction about why Bitcoin is really, really a remarkable thing. And I think it goes far deeper than most people would give it credit for. Even people that would call themselves full-on maxis and sound money advocates and all that kind of stuff, I go, there's another layer to this that I think is very, very pertinent to the discussion about what Bitcoin is, which is why I'm such a huge fan and such a huge proponent of like running nodes, making sure people participate in this network, because it is a robust system and it's not foolproof. It's not perfect, and it requires user participation. And I desperately want to see that protected for generations to come, because I literally think it realigns a game that's been being played for 12,000 years. And that was sort of the impetus for the Great Realignment. So hopefully I managed to get through this without being dull. I tried to preface that I might be, but yeah, that's kind of the origin story.
No, I don't think that's dull at all. And I think there's a lot more I want to get into about your background, but let's jump into this. You know, I think one of the things that's really interesting about this, and you tend to come across a piece of work at the right time. And I think that this book is really pertinent for where we are with Bitcoin today. And one of the things that you kind of, I think, really hammer home here is why, asking like two questions, like why are things the way they are? And why is it acting that way? Or why is this entity acting that way? Right?
Yeah.
So let's start with power and the notion of power and what is power? In your book, you kind of have like some simple categorizations of power, like political or national strength. Like after a war, like that could change, the balance of power could change in a particular area. The possession of control or command over people, so like words have power. Political ascendancy or control in the government of a country. They attained power, by overthrowing the legal government. Legal ability, capacity, or authority, like Congress has, certain authority. Delegated authority. A document or written statement conferring legal authority, a person or thing that possesses or exercises authority or influence, a state or nation having international authority influence. Great powers hold, like the G7 will hold a conference, or a military or naval force, So that gets confusing.
Correct.
And people kind of just throw these words around. So yeah. Where would you take it from here in terms of sort of your exploration of power and how you see it?
I mean, I think you summed it up really well. People just kind of toss these terms around, and I think they do so without really thinking about what they're saying, right? Because there's that old saying, the biggest barrier to communication is the illusion that it has been accomplished. And you can have two people talking about the same thing that they think because they're using the same words, but what they're referring to can be vastly different. And I think power, money, greed, all of those things are all those types of terms. Like if I say, like even the current debate with knots and core and spam and not spam and this and that, people go, Bitcoin should be a monetary network. And I say, well, okay, define money. And then people go, you're just being pedantic. You're just, this isn't a philosophy class. Everybody knows what money is. I go, well, the definitions are important, because if you're arguing about something and you're suggesting something should be a thing, then it's probably important to understand what that thing is and what it means and why. And, there are people like Robert Breedlove made an entire career off asking what is money, right? So I go, and I don't think he's come up with a sound answer yet, because it's a really difficult concept to unpack. And that was sort of the starting point of the book. I originally started the book with money, and I thought, well, I want to take it back even further and go, well, where does power come from? What does it mean to be in power? What does it mean to have power? What does it mean to wield power? All those kind of things are all very, very nebulous terms. I mean, you can assign a lot of meaning to what that means. Like I can say I'm powerful, or she's a powerful woman, or she's a powerful singer, or he's a, powerful bodybuilder, whatever it is. But, you obviously can't transpose those onto national power, state power, state authority, things like that. So the purpose of that was to try and kind of strip back the ideas of like, where does power come from? Why do people ascend to power? And to kind of give like a headline type view of it. It's like, if most people cannot withstand sustained periods of chaos, right? Like if you talk about a failed state, if you talk about like Afghanistan after the Russians left, if you talk about, Somalia today, or, Jamaica or wherever, anywhere, what was that, Haiti, anywhere that these these social norms, the power systems collapse within, somebody somewhere is going to come and alleviate the chaos for people. And it's their ability to alleviate that chaos and to bring some semblance of order that ushers them into power. And oftentimes these people are not the people that wanted to do that, right? But the seizure of power is either opportunistic or it's because of necessity. And oftentimes it's both. But the object of capturing power in a system where there are what I call a competitive resource capture economy, that's where power capture comes from. But if you go back before agriculture, and if you look at hunter-gatherer societies and societies that consume as they go, they don't hoard things, right? You go, what do their power structures look like? And they go, what are you talking about? There is none. It is very, very, very egalitarian. People that come on go, you know what? I'm the leader of this group. They just get mocked relentlessly until they go away, right? Like people just do not have any tolerance for anybody that comes along and says, I'm the boss. And so they tend to be these very egalitarian social structures. And so to my mind, I go, well, how is it that human beings manage to live for 250,000 years without any sort of like power hierarchies at all? But then suddenly, just randomly out of the blue, everyone just decided, hey, now is a good time that we should start installing kings and having warlords and leaders and wars and all this kind of stuff. And I say that's a direct result of sedentism, basically. Like when people started putting down roots, when they started having assets that could be hoarded and then thus captured, that's the time when power structures start showing up. And so that's the funny thing about that game is like people that will come in and hoard and steal resources create a lot of chaos, right? Like if you're just a bunch of little farming villages or a bunch of families doing little like small holds, and then a group of thugs comes in and starts stealing stuff, well, then you guys got to gang up and get your pitchfork out and fight back. But then some other gang comes along, and if that gang takes over, then another gang's always trying to take from them, and they're always fighting, but it's constant chaos. Nobody can get anything done. So sooner or later, the gangs kind of figure that out and go, hey, you know what? It's better if we all just kind of group up and we'll just have a coalition. And you can see that in street gangs today. You can see that in El Salvador. You can see it in Brazilian favelas. You can see it anywhere in the world where power structures start emerging like that. The natural inclination is for people to fight, squabble, and grab as much as they can. But eventually that leads to a situation where it's very costly to continue doing that. So then the natural inclination is to gang up, group up, find like groups, and then consolidate resources and territory. And then you start having coalitions fighting each other. And if the coalitions, depending on how big they get, one coalition is going to squeeze another one out. They're going to incorporate smaller coalitions. It grows and grows and grows. If you give that a couple thousand years, you end up with a king and a castle and knights and an orderly system of like, hey, this is how this power hierarchy works. But it starts from resource capture and chaos. Those people just happen to group up and provide some order to that chaos. So that's kind of maybe the long-winded trek around power. Hopefully that was a coherent thought that came out of my head right now.
That was great. And I what really made me think about, though, is just sort of the kind of people that come to power and how it's sort of not sort of by, like you were saying, it's not by dictate, it's sort of emergent. But you'd imagine, and maybe you could describe better than I do, like what are the kind of people that like either become the head of a gang, like in a prison or a mob, or you could even maybe include a politician. Like, what is it about them? Are they just the strongest person? You know, we could talk about like strength, like, you know, what makes them sort of ascend, and what is sort of the life or, you know, of being in power?
Well, that's a great question. And, you know, I think there's been like endless dramatizations of this process, right? And I mean, there's like, you could even just go to like Game of Thrones, because if you know anything about the Game of Thrones and that series and the series of books and all that kind of stuff, it's essentially the English War of the Roses with dragons, right? I mean, that guy just went, read a bunch of history books and said, oh, this might be interesting if I toss a couple of dragons in there and some fantasy tropes, and we got ourselves a new series. But if you look at the leaders and if you look at even the dramatizations of it, they will say things like, well, if it's just strength, then how come all the knights aren't in charge? How come this Weasley little guy in the shadows is the one that's pulling strings? And how come this guy? Because when you start getting to coalition building and when you start getting into navigating complex social dynamics, it's not necessarily the brute that's going to figure that out. Brutes are pretty good at getting there, But there are guys that work angles and do things differently and think their way through problems. And those are the people that tend to rise to those power positions. But they also find as soon as they get there, it's a real pain in the ass, right? Like there's nothing nice about it. And you can never trust people around. It's a miserable existence for everybody that seizes power. It can be quite comfortable until you get a knife in your back, or until someone blows you up, or until your kingdom gets overrun, or until you make a tactical error, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So they tend to be short-lived, and they tend to be people that are very shrewd and also very capable. I mean, especially in like prison gangs, typical like gang type hierarchies, obviously the ability to wield physical violence effectively is an asset and a tool. But being a good coach is oftentimes better. Like if you're good at organizing that violence and making sure that you counter whatever tactics your enemy is bringing, that brings a lot of, prestige to you as a leader of that group. You go, hey man, we were outnumbered 2-1 by these gangs, but old Tommy here came in and he just said, do this. And then next thing you know, we whooped those guys and they kicked them right out of the neighborhood. And so it's that kind of tactical thinking. And a lot of times it just boils down to luck, right? I mean, if you think about like what has turned the tide of battles, I don't know if you ever read War and Peace, but there's a great little passage in there where there was a fellow, it's a fictional book, obviously, but based on sort of events. But there was a guy who was standing on a hill, and some general came along and said, hey, you're not supposed to be standing on the hill. You're supposed to be doing this. And why are you wasting all this time? So the guy followed his orders and did that. What the general didn't know, because he came waddling down the hill, was that guy was there for a reason. And now that he left, that reason got exposed. And the whole tide of the battle changed because this one dipshit came along and said, hey, you shouldn't be here. I know what's best, and get out of here, right? So, but that's true of any physical combat. These are very, very delicate competitions, and they can come down to fractions of a second. I mean, things that can turn the tide of battle can be, as minuscule as a mouse fart, or it can be as big as an atom bomb, but you never know what the thing is that made that one come out victorious and the other. The problem is if you are embroiled in a power hierarchy and you kind of look around the world and go, hey, I'm here because God willed it. I belong here. I'm the smartest one. You start thinking like, hey, these successes are because I am here. And you start leaving out I'm here also because like Tom slipped and he knocked all those bombs off the roof, and then they fell on the guys that were coming up behind us and we didn't see them. So that was kind of a good thing because we would have got wrecked otherwise. But I'm here because I'm a brilliant tactician. I'm ordained by God, et cetera, et cetera. So, the type of personality that gets there, it can oftentimes be very different than the type of people that stay there and sustain it, which is why I think you see these power structures come into place, the bureaucracy come into place, because they then surround themselves with layers of other things to keep them away from their own decisions and their own egos and things like that. But it's also a way to put barriers between you and the people that are trying to seize power from you, right? So it's a complex bugger, as they say.
Yeah, it really made me like vacillate between there's the sort of the randomness of how things can happen, and people can have survivor bias or success bias, but at the same time there might be a sense of a natural law or just order of like, where you see someone like Tony Soprano, and there's part of me was like, Tony, this is not going to end well. Like, why did you even covet this role? Why does people like you want this role over and over and over, knowing how it usually doesn't end well on that? You seize that power and you think you're going to be the one to hold it forever, and you're going to prevent the kind of people like yourself who took it from you. But it's almost inevitable. And I mean, and so it's like, why? But it's like they're calling. Yeah, so that really made me think about that a lot.
Yeah, well, I think it's an excellent analogy, and I think Tony Soprano probably resonates really well in terms of what we're talking about. Because, I mean, if you look at the power structures that the Italian mafia, for instance, created in the United States, and I mean, they have state influence, right? So if you look at that, you go, what kind of person wants to become an astronaut, right? Like there's a select subset of human beings that just go, I really, really want to try that. But it's the same subset of human beings that want to be a rock star. It's the same subset of human beings that want to be a great basketball player. Most people just don't have the core attributes to get there. to begin with, right? Like they just don't have the aptitude, ability, or skills to be Michael Jordan or to be. But the thing is, once you get to like the minor leagues of baseball, or once you get to the little farm leagues of basketball, or any of these competitive hierarchy type, these competitions for these very, very rare possibilities of success, if you try and delineate what's the difference between this astronaut candidate that went through and this astronaut candidate that didn't, you go, on paper, good luck. You'll never find that je ne sais quoi. And it's the same thing with the baseball hierarchy. Like there was a guy, oh God, I can't remember his name. He was a catcher for the Dodgers. He was remarkable to me because he spent like 15 years in the minors as a catcher. So if you know anything about baseball, that guy, like by the time you're 27, your knees are wrecked. This guy was 35 and still duking it out in Double-A, and making 25 grand a year and sleeping on crappy mattresses and just doing the grind. And all the while he's got like 18-year-old kids that are absolute studs coming up right behind him, and every voice on the planet going, dude, you're 35. You're not, your day passed, man. It's never going to happen. You're never going up. You're never going to make it to the bigs. And then one year, age 36, he got called up to the majors. He went, he like led the Dodgers in, on base percentage and just absolutely crushed it. I mean, he was an absolute stud. And he got to retire with a couple million, sort of bonus, and he got to play in the bigs, and but you think about like what kind of person can endure that? You go, I don't know, who knows, right? So was it natural that he got there? Maybe. Was he just batshit crazy and got lucky? Maybe. I mean, did it take that long for his natural ability, aptitude, and skills to catch up with the needs? Maybe. Is it that how long it took him to be able to deal with the pressure that made him choke earlier? Maybe. So there are guys there for every Tony Soprano that makes it. To your point about survivorship bias, there's 1,000 would-be Tony Sopranos that don't ever get there. Most of them aren't qualified for the job, and the few that are left are, they're always one, car bomb away from getting offed, or one backstab, or one betrayal, and then they just don't get there. And the thing that makes those stories so dramatic is not so much like the will of the person to survive. It's the miracles that they do survive to get to where they are. Like if you think about any of those sort of dramatic characters, whether it's from Shakespeare to Breaking Bad or The Sopranos or whatever, you go, what did that guy have to endure to get to that place where he became suddenly fragile and vulnerable? You go, oh my God. Well, there's that one time where he almost got blown up, but then, XYZ happened. And that one time when the feds were closing in, they did this, but then he escaped through the sewer and no one saw that coming. So, oh my God, but you go, is that his skill? Or was he just really good at wiggling when he needed to? And the thing that kept him safe was probably more a roll of the dice and, the universe lining up more than anything else. So I think it's really difficult to kind of pin down like what makes anybody be successful. And that's true if they're a corporate raider, a CEO, those are same sort of hierarchies. You go, how did this guy get chosen, this guy not? And you can look at any number of things, professional sports, acting. There was a guy I knew that was an actor. He'd been acting for 15 years. He came down to a role that would have been life-changing for him as him and 4 other guys, and he didn't get it. One guy got the role and is probably going to go on TV shows and go, yeah, man, I got here because I worked hard and I did this and reasons. And there's 3 other guys that did exactly the same thing, and it could have literally come down to like, I don't know, I kind of like that guy's eyebrows. Yeah, me too. Like he's got those kind of great eyebrows. Like these guys are all great, but that one guy just, his eyebrows are just, they'll never say on David Letterman or whoever's talking on talk shows these days, like, oh, well, I got chosen because I had great eyebrows. Like these other guys were probably way better than me, but it was my eyebrows that just really put me over the line. They'll never say that kind of stuff, right? So it's I hope I'm not just rambling here, but that's kind of
this. It's interesting with sort of in that respect, like how even just like maybe missing a piece of mail could change your whole life.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It does for everybody all the time.
And how interesting that would be. Where something I saw in the book was, where does sheriff come from? So that's a pretty big role in the States.
Yeah, that was the Shire Reeve. That was actually a new one on me too. I remember I first read about that in law school. And the Shire Reeve, back when in English shires, each shire would hire or elect or however you choose a reeve. And the reeve was kind of the spokesperson for the shire. But part of the English honor system back then is much like the modern day gang system. Like, you're part of my family. If you screw up, we have to punish you. It's not the town's not going to come and take care of you. We're going to take care of you. And so the Shire Reeve was simultaneously like the person that would kind of be a spokesperson for the Shire. They would be a person that would kind of, mediate disputes. They would be the sort of public, like wrangle the drunks and maintain order kind of thing. So they became like the sort of de facto pseudo-elected leader of the Shire. And then the Shires would each send their Shire Reeves to the Shire Reeve conference every year, and they'd have, swag bags or whatever. I don't know what they did back then. But that position sort of developed out of that and became formalized. And we still call it a Shire Reeve to this day. It's called a sheriff. And if you kind of look at the constitutional history of a sheriff, and you'll see these like constitutional sheriffs around the world, like they occupy a very, very unique position in the legal authority scheme, because they are somewhat immune to like some of these constitutional mandates. They are not immune to county budget, allocations though. So they can come out and say, I'm a constitutionalist, I'll never follow this law. And the county board can go, well, we're not going to fund your department. So good luck being, whatever you think you're going to do. So they have practical constraints on it, mostly related to money. But in terms of like the on paper authority that they wield within the county, it's actually a pretty powerful position. So yeah, but it's a fascinating evolution of things, I think. And that was one of the reasons I put it in there, is because it kind of shows like how these early power structures develop and sort of the reasons behind why we create these power structures. But it sort of advances all the way through to where you end up with like officers of the court and the chancery courts and the ecclesiastical courts all sort of merging into like the common courts we have today. And the way all these power structures sort of coalesce into these very grand institutions that are by design intimidating, right? Like, I don't know if you've ever been to a court of law, but just walking into that little room, it's, I mean, for the most part, the furniture kind of sucks. The decor isn't all that great, but if you kind of look around, you go, oh yeah, these are like all the trappings of projected soft power, like the stuff like Jason Lowery would talk about. But the higher up that ladder you go, like if you ever walked in the Supreme Court, that's a vastly different experience, and it's like this sort of sense of being hallowed ground and all this kind of stuff. And the attorneys, like the first time a guy walks in there as an attorney, is just like shaking in his boots. But that's, the projection of that soft power. So, yeah, but that's the sort of nutshell version of the Shire Reeve turning into our modern day sheriff, and or at least the vestiges of it, I should say. It's not quite exactly the same thing, but it's a very formalized version of at least that's where the name comes from.
Sure. How did things drastically change for sort of humans in competitive resource acquisition and with like going from hunter-gatherer to sort of agricultural?
Well, that's the thing. Like if you go look through the archaeological record, and it's fascinating to bring that up. I think it's a great question, because I think that's sort of the crux of the shift that I talk about in the book, because there are examples, there are historical, like anthropological and archaeological evidence of like large scale conflict amongst what you might call pure hunter-gatherers that don't practice sedentism and they consume as they go kind of thing. And 99 times out of 100, it's because one group came along and said, hey man, this fishing hole is pretty cool. How about we just keep the fishing hole? Like instead of moving around, we're just going to like, this is our fishing hole now. And then the other group that's used to coming by will go like, hey guys, how's it going? We came to get some fish. And they go, no, you can't have any fish anymore. They go, what are you talking about? This is just like the fishing hole. And they go, yeah, but it's our fishing hole now. And you go, what do you mean your fishing hole? Like God gave you a fishing hole? What are you talking about? Like this is, it's nature's bounty. Like you can't just keep something. Like you can't just have land. What are you talking about? And then they duke it out, right? And they would turn into these really, really horrific battles. So it's almost inevitably when someone tries to like exclude others from a shared resource, or when they have the ability to hoard a necessary resource, is when you start seeing people go like, hey, I don't like you took all the deer, right? So they get mad and then they start fighting about it. Agriculture sort of accelerates that process. Because like if you're some 22-year-old kid who just got kicked out of your last village and you're wandering around in the forest and you're kind of hungry and you look over and you see this little like farming village and you notice there's a bunch of fat plump people sitting around just, hoeing the grass and, plucking potatoes or whatever they're doing. You go, well, I could go and offer to work for these people, but the last time I did that, they all got pissy with me and they called me a jerk and they kicked me out of the village or whatever. But now I'm kind of a big, strong 22-year-old. I'm full of piss and vinegar, and I bet you I could just go beat the hell out of that guy and take his potatoes. That might work out pretty good.
You mentioned like tournament style in the book. or and how does that sort of what was the lesson we saw there, and how would you explain what you meant by tournament style?
Well, I mean, if you look at like the competitions, these were tournaments for, back in the day, like if you talk about the European continent in general, right? Like they would field these big armies, they would go, and it was essentially a tournament. They would go out and stand in the field and go, okay, we're going to put our guys against your guys, and we're going to see who wins. Whoever wins that tournament, then they go, okay, well, what's the prize? Well, you get to keep this keep, you get to keep this castle, my goats, whatever it was, right? So it becomes a tournament style competition, but it also, because of that tournament style, like they wouldn't necessarily just go and lay siege to stuff, right? Like, I mean, that could happen, that would happen, but far more common were these battles. I mean, there's historical accounts of these big epic battles all throughout history where two armies march in. And it's not till later that you start seeing wars of attrition and, the kinds of wars that like World War II was and World War I was. World War II was probably the penultimate version of like the war of attrition kind of thing. Like we're going to throw massive resources and destroy everything trying to win this, whatever they're trying to win, whatever prize they're trying to capture. But, prior to that, and even there, they have tournament style competitions. Like, and I say it's a tournament because if you look at like the way it resolves, like it's two guys in a tent sipping tea going, okay, well, I guess you won this one, Tom. And I go, well, where else does that happen? That happens at the end of a match, right? Like that's not, one guy standing over the other guy and his face is in the money, drives a sword through the back of his head and goes, yeah, that proves we won. It's guys that parlay and talk about things when they're done. But there's a couple of guys in control of that and they just field their armies and whoever, comes out. But the beauty of the tournament style competition is that it breeds a lot of, innovation, right? Because if you're in a competition, you go, well, hey, the last time we went out there, like we sank to our knees in mud and maybe we should make lighter armor. Maybe we should get something that can throw a rock further, whatever it is. They're always seeking advantage. So that advantage seeking tends to foster innovation, especially if there's a massive playing field for these competitions to take place. Like the innovation occurs a lot quicker because you learn from both losing and winning and you kind of go, oh, hey, that was a pretty good idea. Like those guys ran off in a pack and then they came around behind us and just beat the hell out of us. That was a great idea. We should do that too, So that's kind of the development of that. And the point of that in the book was like, it tended, people say, oh, it's because Europeans are more advanced or more this or more that. But if you kind of look at the way the Asian dynasties did things, they didn't necessarily, compete that way. They would certainly have fights and they would certainly squabble over things, but it wasn't like, hey, you get your army together, I'll get my army together, I'll meet you at 10 o'clock on Sunday and we'll just duke it out and see who wins, And so the argument, at least that one paper that I was referencing in there was like, well, that's why their military tactics kind of fell behind their European counterparts, despite, China having a 2,000-year head start on civilization, arguably. So, that was sort of what that was about. But I mean, if I may, I can kind of trace back to what I was saying before with the young men capturing resources and things like that. If that's not too much of a diversion, we can keep going where we're headed right now if you want.
No, please.
Well, there was just an interesting thing, like the Fiat was what I was going to talk about. And the Fiat were like they're romanticized today. And they said, oh, these were young men that were cast out from their homes and they would band together in the forest and they'd go on adventures. And to get accepted, you have to prove bravery in battle and write a poem or sing a song or stuff like that. And I go, do you not see the parallel to modern gang initiation rituals? You go, hey, we're a bunch of young men that have been cast out from our neighborhoods or homes or families, whatever. We band together so we can capture resources ourselves on the margins of society. And how do you get in? Well, you got to do an act of bravery and you got to prove yourself in combat. Well, they get jumped in and they got to go and go rob that store and that'll prove that you're a badass and, do this and that. And hey, if you got some dope flows and some good rhymes, man, like that's added bonus. Like you're obviously worth rolling with us, but it's the same process. And this thing has been going on for 12,000 years. Like all the time, there's a bunch of young men that get disenfranchised and they run off and then they form these little gangs and they do crazy stuff out in the forest or out in the, city streets. But if they get clever enough and they get powerful enough and they gather enough power behind them, they suddenly become a transformative force. And you can hear Nayib Bukele to this day. It goes, hey, back when MS-13 was effectively running our country, all the NGOs and all the political bodies were telling them you should form a political party. Go, what? You mean the guys with the devil tattoo on their face and the thing, and they're, using machetes to cut people's heads off and leave them on the Fountain Square? Like, those guys should form a party? Why is that? Because they were able to capture sufficient resources to be a political force, right? So when I say in the book, like, all means of power capture are valid, that's what I'm talking about. If you, as the Bloods or Crips or MS-13 or whoever, can wield sufficient force and authority where the authorities cannot counter you anymore, then you're a power to be dealt with in the region. And you can ascend political legitimacy just by being strong enough to take power from people that are in power, if that makes sense. So,
Yeah.
but that was my little diversion back I wanted to kind of cover, but yeah.
Well, that's important. So I really want to I want to get into this chapter about authority.
Oh, yeah, please.
So it seems like around 12,000 years ago, prior to the advent of agriculture and animal husbandry, pure hunter-gatherers were different. They didn't create these types of social structures and rule-based systems. So what was different? What kind of rule-based systems then get created? And what about, like, because this talks about like cooperative effort. Is that the normal state of human beings, to be cooperative? And are we all looking to be in competition with each other? Is that the natural state?
Well, I mean, that's the funny thing about it is, like, I think people conflate the idea of like competition for scarce resources, because that's a very common trope. They go, oh, life is a competition for scarce resources. I go, well, not really. I mean, resources are abundant, but there can be competitions in the near term. But if you look at it from like a broader lens, you go, well, that's just homeostasis is what we call that. Like, hey, that wolf ate that deer. Okay, well, things are in better balance, because if the wolf doesn't eat the deer, then, so it looks like a competition between the wolf and the deer, but in a bigger picture, you go, well, the ecosystem is now better off because the balancing mechanism worked. And so when human beings were part of that balancing mechanism, there is no real need to form a power hierarchy. Like I said before, those societies tend to be very egalitarian. If you go down, there's modern day examples. Like, you can go visit the Hazda. I think they're in Tanzania or Namibia or wherever they are right now. Go, hey, can I hang out with you guys for a little bit? And go, hey, who's the leader? And they go, what are you talking about? Like, what do you mean leader? Like, we just kind of do shit, like, there's nobody telling us what to do and when we're supposed to do it. But there's that sort of shared, like, if a lion comes and they're all sort of saying they're all going to gang up and go, nope, we're one right now. That thing's a problem. We're going to deal with it. But no one has to tell them to do it, right? They just work together cooperatively. If there's old people in the village, they'll go, hey, Tom, you're not pulling your weight anymore, so just go die, right? They feed the old, they feed the young. But wolves do this. Like, all pack animals take care of the weak and the young and the elderly, because that's how the pack survives, right? And I think humans do the same thing. Does that mean people don't, like, go, I bet you I run faster than you? Go, well, of course. People enjoy competition, like in gamesmanship and things like that. But it doesn't necessarily equate to power struggles and power competitions, right? The power competition starts showing up when one person says, hey, these are all mine, you can't have any. And someone else goes, well, I kind of like those things and I'm pretty sure I can take it from you, so I'm going to try, and then you've got a very different kind of competition that's evolved from there. So I would say the natural inclination for human beings is cooperation, almost universally. Even in competitive resource capture economies, the group that cooperates the best tends to be the one that is more successful in tournament style competitions, in combat, in, like the entire essence of team building and team sports like football, baseball, any of those things, soccer. Those are all squad level tactics, right? To teach squad level coordination under a somewhat like a leader of that group, right? Like the team captain or whatever it is. And it's mimicking combat roles, right? And the pressure of playing live in front of an audience adds to that pressure. It's like simulated combat, just without the death and destruction. But if a team is not cooperating, if you've got two like egomaniacs on the team and they don't pass the ball to each other, or whatever it is, they're always squabbling, a team doesn't do very well. So cooperation is the cornerstone of success, even if there are two groups in competition, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it seems to me like the turning point in human history, and from like the way I read the book, is that hunter-gatherers, in my mind, the way I'm thinking about this is we're all out here trying to do our best for ourselves, catch whatever food I could eat today, maybe I'll eat a little bit of it tomorrow, gotta do it all over again. All of us are kind of like doing it all over again every day. Maybe I catch enough to grow a family a little bit, maybe catch enough for my parents, my kids, my grandkids, whatever. Do it all over again. We're all in it together. All of a sudden, maybe we start cooperating, but for some reason, we start herding animals, goats, and growing corn, whatever it is. But, we work together to do that. But kind of at the end of the day, like one guy's got 200 goats and one girl's got all the corn. And all of a sudden it's like, well, like we're not all out here starting over every day.
Right.
This guy's got all the goats, and maybe like, now I'm starting to think about, what power or authority does he have, and what, kind of from the book, it's like, well, there's power, but like, and there's rules, but there's no rules, because if I can get those goats and feed my family for a generation, they're my goats now. And if I can gun this person, they're mine.
Well, I think you're spot on. I mean, I think that's the shift, right? Like when it gets to a place where people are, by choice or necessity, need to exclude others from a resource, that's when people start fighting. When the fighting starts is when the structure starts forming, right? It's like if you put two kids in a room and go, hey, whoever gets that ball first wins, right? And go, and there's no prize even. You just tell two kids, go get the ball, they're going to start squabbling within about 45 minutes. Like, hey, that wasn't fair. You did this, you did that. Oh yeah, but I got the ball. I won, but over nothing, like quite literally nothing, just a fiction that you created by walking in a room. You can encourage these kids to fight within 30 minutes just by saying whoever wins this is the best, So when you're actually talking about survival resources, because if you look at most like smallholds back in the day, like early medieval or early England, let's say, or at least the English continent or island, you can look at it and go, well, how much were they able to store? It's like, oh God, almost nothing, dude. Like those guys were lucky if their potatoes came up because they didn't understand anything, right? But they kind of got by, but they were also like a mix. Like they'd grow some potatoes, but they still had to go out and forage. They still had to go and hunt. They still had to go do this stuff, but they had like a settlement going on, right? But the second you put down roots, the second you become sedentary, when you got the Fiat, when you got the local gang coming by, they can go, well, man, I'm hungry too. Last time we tried to kill an elk, Tom got gored. That kind of sucked. But hey, look, there's that plump little lady down there who's got a bag full of potatoes. We can just go take potatoes. That's like way easier than fighting an elk. And I think they got some elk in there. Like, let's go get that, right? So the second those guys come and do that, then they've stolen something. And once you have that theft, then the natural thing is to retaliate or to try and get it back or to defend or whatnot. And you can see these power systems just evolve dynamically from just that one act of like, I want, you have, I'm taking, So regardless of how it develops, most of them don't develop in, like Afghanistan's been ruled by warlords since the Soviets left. And despite the U.S. intervention, the 20 years of them just kind of trying to wrangle goats, they never managed to overcome the tribalism in that country. And they're right back to it. But they have a loose coalition of warlords that all say, well, hey, we're going to use some religious doctrine to sort of normalize behavior as much as we can. And, if you combine like all your gangs are all together and now you have a godly purpose, like it gives you a lot of legitimacy in the people that you're trying to govern, so to speak. And it also gives you a rule book to follow. Hey, did you steal that? Yeah, we'll cut off his hand, right? Like there's no like, hey, let's talk about it. Let's bring in some evidence. Let's see if he's got some witnesses. And they just go, nope. We're just going to, because that brings a lot of order to the chaos that's going on. But it also tends to hinder things like how well the country can survive, right? So those institutions help with thriving under a power system. But absent the institution, the next level down is like, well, we got to prevent the chaos. We got to prevent people from eating each other in the streets and being batshit crazy. We need some stability here because otherwise it's intolerable. Like no one can stand it. The gang leaders can't stand it. They're just killing each other. The people can't stand it because they're starving and, everybody's miserable. Everything sucks. And so somebody comes in to try and fix the mess is kind of what it boils down to,
Right. Like we need some rules here and just to get some order. But the more rules we get, the more the way people are going to cheat. But it seems like the arc you're painting for me is that we've gotten to a place where things could be, you could say this is bad, but like we're in a much better place because if we're in this place like with Afghanistan warlords or in Iraq after the war, it's like there's in-group and out-groups. and you have to be in one of them or to survive. Because if you're in no group, you're kind of going to be like just random shrapnel, and you're going to get hit. So now you got to jump in a group, but even that sucks because now you got to do all the things the group expects of you, and maybe in this situation, it's things you don't want to do, right? And you got to be lucky to survive. You got to be good and lucky.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's like going through, it's like being hazed, or you're going through the meat grinder. And if you're really good at it, you get to the top where everybody wants to kill you in like an inverted, like your enemies want to kill you at the bottom in a way. But when you get to the top, now everyone inside the group wants your job.
Right.
Wants to be you. And the better you are at it, the higher you go. But like, I feel bad for people who are just like, I don't want to play this game. And it's almost like the game picks you.
Right.
And it seems like in America, a place like America, is just a more civilized version of the game, where the outcomes have been muted down so that people don't die every day from the randomness of the game.
Right.
And so you can't maybe ascend as much, but you can't descend as quickly either. And it's a little more civilized in some way. But that kind of brings us to like our authority.
Right.
And sort of like, where do what is authority? Like, who gets to, like, how would you describe what authority is, maybe in the context of like a sport or a game?
Well, I think the authority, like the way I kind of frame it in the book, is like the person who's the authority is the one that gets to make the rules, right? So if two of you meet in a field and there are no rules, and you go, this is our field now, and you duke it out and you fight it out, and then your group comes out on top and you happen to be the leader of that group, well, now you get to make the rules for what happens on the field. You guys get to farm here. You guys get to do this. I'm the authority here because I took this and you can't take it from me. No one else can. And that's the cornerstone of sovereignty. And that's the Peace of Westphalia. And that's that whole treaty that they came up with. They sort of delineated like, well, you guys have been duking it out over here for this amount of time, and it looks like you've got pretty good control of it. And we've been duking it out here. So let's just draw a line between the two and say, that's yours, this is ours. And we won't argue about it anymore. They go, okay, great. But obviously they did. So when you're an authority, you are the person that is able to make the rules for the resources under your control, right? And when I talk about a game of competitive resource capture, you go, well, the barest essential of that game is like, I need to capture some food. Now I control food. And when you can control food, then you can go, well, now I'm a little bit stronger. I'm a little bit better fed. I can get more people on my side because I got all this extra food laying around. So now I got like 10 guys that can go, and how about we just take over this land? We don't want to farm the land. There's already people on the land. We can just make them keep farming, and then we just keep getting food. So that's a pretty good deal. All right, let's do that. Yeah, okay, great. But the example I use all the time is like, if you think about like Little Italy and, 1950s, and the mob boss comes by and goes, hey, Sal, I see you got a nice sandwich shop here. So how about you just give us like 10 sandwiches every week, and we'll make sure that nobody breaks up your shop. And the guy goes, hey, GFY, man, I came to America. I make this from nothing. It's my place. You cannot do this to me. And I go, okay, whatever you say, Sal. And then the next day the guy comes back and smashes up his shop and bonks him on the head. And then the same guy comes back the day after that and goes, hey, Sal, looks like your shop got busted up. Where are those cops that were going to come save you? Doesn't look like they helped you out very much. Like I'm telling you, you could have just given us 10 sandwiches and this would have been great. And Sal goes, if he has half a brain in his head, he goes, okay, well, 10 sandwiches. I got to make extra, I got to charge 10 cents more per sandwich. Okay, I can cover the sandwiches to the mobster. But sooner or later, the mobster is going to have plenty of sandwiches. And he doesn't need sandwiches stored up in his fridge forever and ever and ever. So one of the clever things a mobster can do in the absence of anything else is to go, hey, let's make people pay us the tax in, I don't know, like wampum or cowrie shells or obsidian beads or silver coins or whatever. They have to pay us this tax, but they have to accept the tax that we collect from them when we come and, when we need stuff from them, right? So it gives them the ability to marshal their resources in a way where they can still capture the fruits of their labor without having to store the fruits of their labor on demand, right? And so when we start talking about like, where does this authority come from and the rules and all that kind of stuff, when you start coming up with rules about like, how do I get resources out of these people that are under my control now? How do I get them to work the farms? How do I get them to keep giving me stuff? How do I, one of the great ways to do that is to invent money, so that's where I kind of get to, I might be skipping ahead a little bit here, but
you slightly slipped in where money comes from.
Right. Yeah.
you know,
Well,
which is
there's yeah,
very different than sort of the credit-based theory or the barter theory.
right. Yeah. Yeah.
And it kind of speaks, it's more pragmatic. It speaks to just like what the need is and what the problem was, and why it's a sort of a fiat or a solution that's kind of just dictated. And it's
Correct.
through force. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's kind of interesting.
Well, I mean, it's a chartalist view. Like if you look at the chartalists, and the funny thing about the chartalists is they went on to become people like the MMT proponents, and they influenced people like Maynard Keynes and all those sort of like illustrious thinkers of like, well, the state creates money, so the state can just create as much money as they want, which I think is a corruption or a bastardization of the idea. But I do agree on, at least on some level, that money is a creation of the state, not the other way around. And there will be people, you know, the monetarists or the commodity people or the credit people come on and go, well, so-and-so did such and such trade in Africa with this and they didn't have a state. And I go, yeah, but that's, you know, that doesn't necessarily mean that money came from the two randos that were working in, you know, Mesopotamia and trying to trade beads for salt or whatever it was. So just because someone else has figured out a way to use a medium of exchange doesn't necessarily mean that's where the money, the idea of money comes from, right? So it kind of conflates two ideas. But, you know, I mean, that would be a debate for like, you know, some other PBS or something, I don't know. But the broad point being is, yes, I think that money origin story is problematic. And the way you framed it, where you say like, it kind of makes sense, right? I go, well, yeah, that's the part that I come to as well. I look at it and I go, this makes more sense to me. Like it makes more sense that a state would create money as an effort to manage resources under the control versus like, hey, these markets just spontaneously cropped up out of nowhere and we don't know why, despite the fact they never existed before agriculture and they never existed before we had power hierarchies, but somehow they just magically showed up and they just created money. And then these kings came around and decided, hey, these peasants came up with this neat thing. We're going to use that as a tax and a medium of exchange. You go, that doesn't make as much sense to me as it does for the sovereign to go, fuck, I don't need any more wheat. What can I do instead of wheat? Oh, I know, coins, you know. But I mean, I may be in the weeds now, but yeah, that's kind of where I'm headed.
Yeah, no, it's very interesting. And I think one of the reasons it's timely is if you think about sort of money being a creation of the state, we think about, Bitcoin is separating money from the state. But right now, the conversation with Tucker Carlson and the CIA, and you could look at sort of, the NSA created SHA-256, like maybe Bitcoin is a creation of the state in the same way. Maybe the state had a problem and they came up with a solution. And that's a different debate in terms of that doesn't really affect what Bitcoin can be for people. But what did sort of Native Americans, what did they think of land ownership or sort of authority? What was that notion like to them?
Well, it was important to them. I mean, it was like and it's well documented. Like there were all kinds of documentarians at the time that would very clearly point out to the people asking, like, hey, what about land ownership? It was a foreign concept. Like, it would be just as foreign as if I walked into your room and said, hey, Cedric, I bought all the air in this room. You can't use it anymore. You'd just be like, what are you talking about? You can't do that, dude. Like, it doesn't work. Like, this is clearly a shared resource. You can't just own the air. And they felt the same way about the land. You go, what do you mean you own the land? Like, are you using this land? No. Well, then how do you own it? Like, what are you talking about? Well, I put a fence around it and I'll bash the hell out of you if you try and walk across it. So it's mine. They just thought that was an insane, they thought of it as a literal insanity. They go, that just doesn't make any sense to me, right? So just the concept of land ownership, I mean, depending on which tribe you're talking about, and there's all sorts of nuance to that discussion as well, but if bared to its sort of essentials, you go, well, are you using that thing right now? No, then it's not really yours anymore. If you're using it, then obviously I can't come and take it out of your hand. I can't just go, hey, you planted a garden here. I'm just going to kick over it and put some daisies in instead. Like everyone knows, like, hey, that's not fair. Like I spent a lot of time building that garden, right? So that there was a respect for the person, right, that was doing or using a thing, but there's not necessarily this idea of like, well, Tom used to put a garden there, but, you know, Tom's been gone for 10 years. He came back and then kicked my daisies out because he said, hey, that's my garden. I grew a garden there 10 years ago. It's mine. You go, what are you talking about, Tom? You've lost your mind, dude. Like that's not how the game gets played, dude. But the European Christians and the resource capture game and changed that. You know, they said, no, this is mine. You can't be here. This is ours. And oddly, one of the first cases tried before the Supreme Court, the natives made that argument. They said, hey, you Europeans are all about title and all about ownership and who's been on the land, who occupies land. we had title of this land and you just took it, and that's not fair. You should pay us for that. And the Supreme Court, I think it's probably their fourth or fifth decision, they came along and said, well, you know what? You're right. You made a really good point here. You guys had title of the land. Unfortunately, you lost. So we're not going to honor any of that. And that was it. Like that. I mean, so you talk about a country that's founded on these principles of individual liberty and respect for property rights and, individual rights and freedoms and yada, yada, yada. But the very first decision from the highest court in the land was like, well, we won, you lost, go suck an egg. Like that was the end result of that, because there was no other way for them to do it. They go, well, if we rule in favor of the Indians, we got to give all the shit back. And that's not going to work. And we're certainly not going to do that, because now we got all these settlements and all that. What are we going to pay the Indians a tax? Not to mention they thought of them as subhuman anyway. So you put all that together and you go, it's kind of a no-brainer. They're just going to go, well, we're in power now. I'm the captain now. You sit down. Sorry, you lost your land. You should have had better guns. You guys should have been in tournament competition all along, because then maybe you would have had a fighting chance, but you didn't. So here we are. So that's kind of where that, traces around in terms of like what that looks like and why, if that answers the question.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. And, you think about sort of like authority in my younger, more childish days, and I can't believe I'm sharing this, but we were walking out of a bar in New York City in Manhattan at like 4:30 in the morning, last call, with a full pitcher of beer, 4 or 5 empty pint glasses, and we get in a cab. And the cab driver says, I'll take you where you guys are going, but you can't bring that full pitcher of beer in here. You can't drink beer in here. And my friend says, well, you going to kick us out? And he said, no. So he said, I guess we can. And it's just sort of, well, if you're not going to punish us, and you get into this weird thing of like, what is authority, who has it, and if I just say no, and you could just do things, But what about, and it also with the in and out group thing, it was really interesting, because you have this such odd behavior with in and out groups where you're in the in group and you're supposed to almost like advance your group and attack the other group. But if you do anything sort of outside the line or do too good of a job, like you have to almost be punished by your group in front of the other group to their liking.
Satisfaction, yeah.
Yeah, to the satisfaction. Yeah. It's this weird yin and yang where you're against them, but like in a weird way, you have to cooperate with them to move forward. And their opinion matters.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the problem with coalitions, right? Is like they put this idea to an extreme test in World War II. They said, how far can we push the coalition thing? Like, where we're not going to police our in group. We're just going to let another out group do whatever they, And without that self-policing mechanism, everybody in the world knows what the outcome of World War II was, right? Like, it was just, Europe was leveled. I mean, it was just absolutely devastating. We, like, factories, thousands of years of history just flattened because of this tournament competition for who's going to control the resources of Europe. And that's the problem with not self-policing, right? So when you talk about international law and all these kind of things and these international norms and international rules, it's because the coalitions realize and recognize, they go, hey, if we just keep duking it out all the time, we all die. Like, nobody wins. Like, someone might come out on top, but all of us are decimated, and that's no good. We want to further our gains. We want to maintain our gains, but we also want to make sure that we're not just willy-nilly duking it out, because it's very, very, very expensive. So it becomes a financial, like at its core, it's a financial decision. I mean, if you take human capital as a financial decision, it becomes very clear. You go, well, we shouldn't get in a war. We shouldn't get in a gang war. And even those gangs, like in prison gangs and all that kind of stuff, those things degrade. These aren't exactly the brightest candles in the box sort of thing or whatever, brightest candles in the room or however you say it, I don't know. But for the most part, they try and avoid that kind of thing because of the cost, right? And I think I use in the book, there's an example, EVE Online. This is a video game, right? And EVE Online had this area in the video game. This is literal, like, people clicking buttons on a computer. Nothing at stake here at all. Like, nothing. It's just code. But there was a section of this space area that had no rules. It was called nullsec. There was no security intervention. If you wandered out there and someone came and took all your stuff, you lose. Sorry. And guess what happened? The exact same identical process that's been repeated over and over and over for the last 12,000 years. One guy came along and said, hey, that guy's got a pretty juicy little spaceship. I'm going to go take spaceship stuff off of him. And then someone said, hey, man, every time someone tries to, like, cross here, like, why don't we gang up and make sure And while we're ganged up, you know what? We can probably take some more stuff over, so we'll get richer. And then another gang forms. Next thing you know, that entire nullsec was divided up into sectors that had policing authority, and they had people going around saying, hey, you can't do this, you can't do that, don't do this here, or we're going to blow you up. And, you know, and suddenly you had rules of trade and all this sort of like market economy and all this kind of crazy shit going on. And they still got in these big battles. But those big coalitional battles ended up costing like real world, something like $200,000 for the participants in this real world battle, or this fictional fake video game battle. But people in the meat space, like me and you, were sitting in front of their computers pumping all kinds of money into this thing to make this happen, and the losses were extraordinary, right? So I don't know how popular that game is to this day. I never played it, but it was such a fascinating journey, because if you look at a tournament style competition in the absence of rulers, in the absence of a rule book, what you get is exactly the same as every single power struggle in the history of mankind, going back 12,000 years. You go, well, isn't that interesting? Right? I mean, it's a self-perpetuating cycle. It has to be. And you know, I give myriad examples. I go, hey, if you get two groups of guys at a picnic and go, hey, let's go kick this ball around, and then one of them comes up with a game. They go, oh yeah, I got it. Whoever can kick the ball through this part of the tree, you know, wins a point. Oh, okay. If they start getting serious about it, and especially if they're super competitive, these guys will be duking it out within, you know, an hour or two. Hey, Tom, that would be, you shouldn't have, you know, they're going to fight, right? So if they want to keep playing the game, they go, well, okay, we gotta come up with some rules. Like, you can't stab Tom in the ass with a picnic knife if he takes the ball from you. That's no good, dude. We can't be, okay, no stabbing Tom in the ass. I got it, okay. What if I poke him in the eyes? I go, no, you can't poke Tom in the eyes either. You got to do, you know, but those rules become more and more intricate and more defined, because there's more and more ways to try and cheat the rules, right? So that's the nature of those resource capture games. But if there's a big prize on the other side of that tree, there's going to be people going, I don't give a shit about the rules. I'm taking the prize. And if you can't stop me, I'm getting the prize. And that's, you know, that's where these games come from. But
Right.
that's why we end up with the system we have, you know.
The real world losses, I think, were 350,000.
There you go.
Yeah, it's crazy. I want to read a little bit from the book. At any rate, after the king's landlord collected those taxes from the peasants, the landlord would keep a share for himself. The rest would go to the king in order to settle the landlord's tax to the sovereign. In this way, community-produced resources were redistributed up from the working peasant class to the managerial landlord class, and then on to the sovereign. If you did not notice, this is much the same redistribution process in use today, with the exception today, of course, that it is much more layered and theoretically voluntary. It is important to the discussion at hand to keep in mind that there is still a gun at the end of that chain. Nonetheless, the larger trouble with taking stuff is that there's only so much wheat or meat or shoes or what have you that you can store before it rots, loses value, or gets too cumbersome. Meaning direct taxation by theft or extortion of goods can quickly become a basic logistics and storage problem. Not to mention, the direct taking of goods leaves a lot of value exchange between your peasants that you cannot profit from through the theft of stuff. Think of it from a king's perspective. If building a fence is a valuable service, why should the king not get a cut of that too? The peasants, after all, are his property by divine right. Their labor is merely a rental, much like a plow horse tilling another man's field. Certainly the king deserves a fee for divinely providing that rental service, right? Nevertheless, the clever way the inventors of modern monetary systems got around these problems was to demand taxes be paid in species instead of stuff. Such an arrangement makes a lot of sense if you are a king and your kingdom has grown quite large. Forcing your population to pay taxes in specie instead of stuff forces them to trade in specie. Put another way, they are now forced to make and do things in order to get specie to pay their tax to you. This arrangement does three really great things for you. Our most honorable, wise, and divine king. You do not have to store a bunch of stuff you do not need right away. You force your population to be measurably productive, no more hiding potatoes. You can give your peasants the specie you took from them in tax receipts to pay them for the work you are indirectly forcing them to do, or to pay for the products you are indirectly forcing them to make, which in turn incentivizes them to be even more productive. What this really made me think about, though, just in terms of how it's very similar to the feudal system, is that no one can even afford not to work. Right. And that's a weird concept today, but like, you're forced to work because you're going to have to pay these taxes in that money, in those political currency units. Right. And so now you have to be productive to afford your taxes. But like, you used to have people, you know, even 100 years ago in America would acquire a piece of land out west and not necessarily work. They would just
Right.
exist. And if you just think about like the psychological, the metaphysical like notion of cost of living. You know, like I was going home the other day on Drive Radio, the DJ was talking about how there was a new study, and if moms got compensated by their husbands or the fathers for their work, they would be making or worth $165,000 a year. And it's a weird study because and I think it's propaganda in the sense that it's embedding the notion that like animals don't think about like, let's not have another kid. It's gonna be more cost of living to have this child. This another deer, a doe. You know, it's just you just procreate and you live and you just be. And taxes in a way like doesn't allow us to just be.
Right. Yeah.
You know,
correct.
that's kind of interesting.
I agree. I think it's super interesting. Like the British actually imposed a hut tax in Africa. They went down, I can't remember the country they were trying to modernize or conquer or colonize or whatever it was. But they came along and said, hey, we got all this labor just standing around. We need to build a train, like a rail line and a road and some dams and stuff like that. But we can't get these people to work. Well, I'll just charge them a hut tax. What? Yeah, if you own a hut, you have to pay tax. Well, how do I get the money to pay the tax? Well, you got to come work for us, and we'll pay you some money. Then you can pay your hut tax. So you go, what did they do there? They go, well, we've got a valuable resource that we're not exploiting. We have all this idle labor, and these people don't give a shit because they're just like, oh, I'm just going to go like, kill a badger and, skin it, and then I'll make myself some shoes, and I'll have some badger meat that week. Then I'm going to go find a honey hive, and I'm going to go eat some honey, and I'll pick some fruit, and otherwise I'm just going to chill and do what I've been doing for the last, generations after generation after generation. I don't care what flag you're carrying. They go, yeah, but you got to work. I go, why? Like, what are you talking about? Well, there's a hut tax now. What do you mean a hut tax? Well, if you don't pay your hut tax, we're going to come throw you in jail. You go, wait, what? I got to pay to live in the thing that I've been living in for the last 40 years that I built by my own hand. Yeah. You owe us money for that now. So, but that's, it's kind of a very stark illustration of what we're talking about. But I remember very clearly, like the first time I got a job, I said, what happened to my paycheck? Right? Like I thought I was supposed to get, $240 this week. I've only got 200. I go, yeah, well, there's tax. I go, what's that for? Well, that's just what you pay to exist. It's like, wait a minute, that hardly seems fair. Like I just existed anyway, didn't I? And the sort of clever thing that these rulers do, by the time if you take all the valuable resources and hoard them and then say, these are all mine now, and you only get access to resources by my permission, therefore I can tax you to have access to my resources. What you've basically done is cut humanity off from humanity's purpose in the world. Just like you said with the doe and the deer, like you go, well, I have a financial decision to make now, we need to have a lot of babies because that's how we can do more labor, right? But once your babies start surviving, you go, well, God, it would be great to have another kid bouncing around and we could, clean up puke. And but I don't know, we're trying to save for Susie's college, so let's think about it. Oh, it's an accident, But these are all very, very strange decisions in the history of humankind. The thing you'll notice is like the hunter-gatherer tribes don't ever like go like, hey, let's just have like 50 kids. That only shows up after agriculture, where you go like, hey, man, we need extra labor here. Well, how do we get extra labor? Well, let me just keep making babies. And sooner or later, we can put them to work, and that's going to help us. Half of them are going to die. So their financial calculation is very different, but it's still a financial calculation. At least, I mean, they might not think so right out of the gate. But you certainly don't see like one guy cruising around the Hazda tribe going like, yeah, I knocked her up, I knocked her up. I got 10 out of that one. They just don't do it because it doesn't make any sense to the tribe, right? They just go, well, that's like a lot of mouths to feed and like knock that off, like quit doing that. But the gal herself will just be like, no, get off me, go away. Like, we're not doing this tonight. I don't know what you're drunk, get out of here, whatever, right? So these calculuses all change just from the exclusion of resources, right? It changes everything about the world and how people interact with the world. The thing I used to say to people is like the earth provides everything you need to survive as a human being. The fact that people prevent you from doing that should be the thing that angers you more than the fact you're being taxed or that, you don't get paid as much or you're being diluted because of this, that, and the other thing. It's like, you can just go grow a garden and you can, hunt things and you can live. It's not quite as convenient. It's not quite as comfortable, but you've been separated from your humanity. You've been separated from the earth, and that's one of the reasons why I think Bitcoin is such a big deal, because if you're talking about a game that has no rules and is ruled by people in power and their ability to exclude people from resources, but suddenly you have a resource that gets introduced to this game that's been being played for 12,000 years, and you go, well, hey, no one can take this resource from you. Oh, that's an interesting wrinkle. Well, what do we do about that? Well, it forces you to trade. You have to trade for this resource. You can't just come and seize it. I can't just look at you and go, hey, Cedric's got, 1 Bitcoin, 50 Bitcoin, 1,000 Bitcoin. I'm just going to go bonk him on the head and take his Bitcoin. I can try and coerce you to do it, but if you set things up in a way, you go like, it doesn't, you can beat me until I'm purple, dude. I can't get to that without XYZ things happening first. And that's never going to happen. So we can negotiate, or you can just kill me, but I can't give you the Bitcoin. I can't get it. Sorry. I'm excluded from my own resource, but I have sovereign control over it, right? That's a very, very different rule in the game, because there's a game without rules. If I had an army behind me and a wall of nukes, and I just happened to be in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and just sitting here doing my thing, and I go, you know what? I'm going to take over the United States of America. Who's going to stop me? The cops? I go, hey man, like I got a nuke and I got a 5,000 strong army. Like how many cops you got on the beat right now? 40. All right, let's go, dude. Okay, now I guess I'm the ruler of Albuquerque. Yeah. Okay, cool. I am the mayor of Albuquerque. Well, I'm going to branch out. Now I've conscripted a bunch of people from the city of Albuquerque. I've armed them to the teeth, and I got nukes behind me. So if you try and invade Albuquerque, I'm going to blow up Washington, D.C. Let's go. Like, could I take over Texas? Yeah. Could I? How much property in the United States could I take over if I had 10,000 strong army and a bunch of nukes at my disposal? You go, ooh, that's a problem, right? Because who's going to stop you? Those guys in Malheur County in Oregon took over a reserve prior to the Malheur County thing. They got into a big fight outside of Elko, Nevada, I think it was, with the cops. They said, hey, we're grazing our cattle. We've been grazing our cattle. You're not changing the rules. The cops said, you can't do that. We're here to stop you. And then a bunch of guys in trucks showed up with rifles and said, go ahead and try. And the cops went, oh, well, that's a problem. Okay, we're going to leave. Like that was it. Like the cops, the ultimate authority, they have all the state power behind them, just went, nope, not doing that, because we're way outgunned. We're going to lose bad. So let's not lose bad. Let's regroup and figure out a different way to, so they went to the negotiating table. Bitcoin circumvents all of that stuff. You just go, well, it's mine. You go, okay, well, we're here to take it. Good luck. Okay. Wow. Well, you got a lot of it. Yeah, I know. Yeah, I'm super powerful, right? So it changes the game. It gives people access to a thing that no pleb, no peasant, no what I call like the human farm animal has ever had access to for the last 12,000 years. I have something you can't take. King, president, government, whatever. It doesn't matter how many guns you have. It doesn't matter how many nukes. You just can't take it. You can kill me, but you can't take this thing. And it's valuable now. The second it became valuable and widely accepted, you go, oh, all right, that fundamentally changed the game forever. And that's why I'm such a huge proponent of Bitcoin, is because it comes from that understanding of money, the origins of power, the origins of state power, and all those sort of things, and which circles me all the way to like, oh, there's this really neat thing that changes this resource capture game rule forever, and it fundamentally realigns those sort of resource capture game rules.
Well, I do want to backtrack a little bit because you brought
sure.
up there, but like, what do you think about stock to flow as far as the valuation of money or the...
When it comes to Bitcoin, the rules are simple. Run your own node, hold your own keys, and protect your seed phrase. That's where MicroSeed comes in. Unlike bulky backups, MicroSeed is stamped onto a tiny steel washer. Fireproof, waterproof, and so small you can carry it anywhere or hide it in plain sight. Go to microseed.io and use the code MATRIX for a discount on your order.
It's got its merits in terms of like, it sort of makes intuitive sense if you don't think about it too hard. But the examples they always use, like, I think Lynn Alden uses wampum, and they talk about, most people that promote this theory talk about things like, whether it's cowrie shells or obsidian beads or, whatever it is, the notion says like, well, hey, the stock to flow characteristics of gold are lower than cowrie shells or wampum or, obsidian beads or rye stones of yap or whatever. That's why they succeeded as money. And I go, well, but that's assuming that all those other things were money to begin with, and they weren't. Not one of those examples is something where you go, this is money. And the example I've been using recently, I don't know if you're familiar with a challenge coin. Do you know what a challenge coin is? Like military law enforcement people. Military and law enforcement people carry these little things called challenge coins, and they usually get issued from their unit because of something they did or something they participated in. It's called a challenge coin because you have to produce it upon a challenge. You go, hey, you got your challenge coin on you. If you don't have it, you got to buy a round of drinks or something like that, right? So it's got all these like social characteristics embedded in it. It's a cultural artifact of military and law enforcement circles, right? And the thing is, there are some challenge coins that are now very valuable to the holder. They go, oh, I got a challenge coin from the CIA special ops team. Ooh, wow. Where'd you get that? Like, I've got a challenge coin from the Department of Corrections in Oregon. You go, so what? Yeah, you and 5,000 other guys, big whoop, right? But not very many people have a challenge coin from like the Los Angeles SWAT team or the, FBI hostage rescue team or things like that, right? So those things become kind of valuable and they can become tradable. Now, if you're a space alien that comes down and you show up at the local law enforcement, symposium, and you just look around and go, look at these hairless apes, these baboons, these backwards monkeys, and all these guys are trading these little coins they call challenge coins. That must be their money. Okay, so we're going to use this as money. So it turns out the FBI, HRT, the hostage rescue team challenge coins are worth a lot. So we're going to go make a bunch of those on our spaceship and bring them down here and start doling them out. Because we noticed that, this guy came to this guy and said, hey, I have an HRT token. I'll trade you for that jacket. And the guy goes, oh, yeah, hell yeah, I'll give you this jacket for that coin. Oh, it's obviously money. They use that to transact value. Okay, so that's their money. So then, they flood the market with challenge coins. Everybody, all the law enforcement cops and everybody go, oh, these things aren't worth anything anymore because these stupid aliens came down and just ruined everything. Like, now we don't even know what a real challenge coin is or not. We don't use them anymore. It's worthless. They go, oh, well, the stock-to-flow characteristics of challenge coins made it so it was replaced as money because our superior, alien doodad widgets are much harder to produce because they're produced in a quantum vacuum in a different galaxy, and that's why it's rare, and that's why that, the stock-to-flow characteristics of our quantum, black dark matter units obviously defeated challenge coins because challenge coins were so easy to make. The stock-to-flow characteristics dominated. That's why quantum dark matter units replaced challenge coins. You go, if you could hear that, and especially if you're the space aliens, you go, oh yeah, that makes perfect sense. Of course, yeah, stock to flow, right? These backwards morons didn't know what real money was. They didn't understand sound money. They didn't understand scarcity, morons. But that's the same attitude that the European Christians had when they encountered all of these native tribes that were trading in these native things. And they would come in and they had a resource capture mentality. They go, we use money. These people must be using money because that's the only way humans interact, because that's what Adam Smith said. We understand this to be true because it's God's divine purpose, and our divine purpose is to capture as much land as possible for God, because we're Christians. That's our mandate in the world. And these heathens don't even get that. They're obviously backwards. They don't have a bath. They don't have a king. They don't know anything. These guys are morons. And they trade this wampum thing. What? Hell yeah, we can, here, have some wampum, dude. Well, can we have this entire island of Manhattan? They go, yeah, sure. I don't know. It's a pretty cool wampum. I never had seen this one before. But it gets diluted, right? So the bigger problem with wampum is that it actually did get adopted as a currency in the colonies, but that wasn't because of the native trade. That was because of the colonists didn't have access to coins. The Spanish and the Portuguese were like dominating the gold trade all throughout North America. So when it came time to like the colonies getting coins, King George was going, no, we need that stuff here. You guys figure something else out. And they go, well, this wampum thing seems to work. Let's just trade that for a while. We'll just use this as our unit of account and our medium of exchange, blah, 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 blah. The fact that the wampum trade collapsed because of the characteristics of wampum being inferior to gold and silver have nothing to do with the fact that stock to flow replaced it. If given a choice, none of them would have been using wampum. They would have been using gold, or they would have been using silver because that's what they wanted to use. They just didn't have it. So because they were in a trading system that required the use of currency and specie and money and things like that, that's what they adopted. But just because they misallocated a cultural artifact doesn't make it money, which doesn't make it subject to a stock to flow thesis, I think. So that's where I think the argument kind of falls apart. And same thing for the Rhinestones of Yap and all that kind of stuff. There are characteristics of it that are reminiscent of money to us, coming from a money idea, like this is how trade happens kind of idea. But if you look at the cultural significance of the Rhinestones and why they were valuable and what what significance was placed on them, it's far closer to the challenge coin than it was to, I mean, just the fact you get the thing across the water is like, wow, Tom's amazing. He brought this whole thing over, dude. Yeah, like, hell yeah, he's rich. But, the guy that I think it was a Dutch explorer who was down there, he said, man, I can't get these guys to do nothing, but they'll work like crazy for these rye stones. And we can just put those things on a ship, dude. We can get that shit anytime we want. So yeah, let's put them to work, dude. Money. But then gold and silver replaced it as money. You go, no, it's just that wasn't the purpose of rye stones to begin with, So that's kind of where I land on the stock to flow theory. I'm sure somebody that was really immersed in it would dicker with me on the finer points or whatnot, but I kind of liken it to geocentrism anymore. I just go like the idea of like money replaced the inefficiencies of barter, or credit systems evolved because of this and that and the other. I go, well, that's kind of like, well, the earth is the center of the universe and all these things revolve around us, and we have to come up with all these different little add-ons to make it work, but it all kind of works if you don't look too hard. But if you start looking a little deeper, you go, well, maybe, just maybe, the origin story is wrong. Maybe you're just starting from the wrong starting assumption, and then you're piling all these ideas on top of it. Like stock to flow is kind of like the, whatever Copernicus, the guy before Copernicus was putting up Ptolemy, I don't know, it was Ptolemy, whatever. That guy was coming up with all kinds of theories about like, well, in this thing, this rotates this way because of this one little wrinkle. And that's why the geocentric model still works. Well, or maybe it's just wrong model. Like maybe, just maybe. But it's got a lot of, academic momentum, I guess, for lack of a better term. So it's hard to disrupt that idea. But I think once you see it, you can't unsee it, I think. And once you kind of look around, you go, oh, yeah, that kind of doesn't make sense. Like none of this stuff really makes sense if you start boiling it down to its essentials. But it makes a lot of sense if you start your analysis 5,000 years too late,
Right. It feels intuitive.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
And it does help, I think, kind of frame things up or compare things, especially as a Bitcoiner comparing it to gold and other commodities. It doesn't necessarily maybe explain the origin or whether it was emergent or top down, I guess. What about free riding? What is free riding?
Well, free riding is the thing that crops up in most resource captured economies, right? Like you can't free ride in an egalitarian hunter-gatherer society because everyone knows, right? Like and they'll mock you. They just go, hey, come on, dude. You didn't do anything. What are you going to lay under a tree again? If you got good reasons, but the guy would never do it, right? Because he would just go, oh, that's not fair. Like I got to go help, But they would certainly recognize, like, if you got a lame foot, they don't just go, hey, you're not pulling your weight, pal. I got a bad foot. Well, you're ostracized from the group. They accept, because it's based on communal sharing, right? And it's based on community thriving. Like everyone goes, well, we all got to kind of work together to get along, right? We all got to work together to kind of make this work. And we all got to respect each other and each other's individuality. And we can't like nick things from each other. And we can't make one guy go do all the work and someone else doesn't and stuff like that. So free riding doesn't really show up very much, just like leadership doesn't show up. Like both get dealt with almost the same way. They just mock them relentlessly and shame them into doing it, or they kick them out of the group, right? And that's pretty easy. But, when you get to a place where it's like, there's a bunch of stuff laying around, you can free ride. Like you can kind of go like, oh yeah, I'm helping with farming this week. Doesn't look like it to me. Well, I got all these potatoes, so somehow that worked, and you can kind of beggar your way around things. And it's really hard. That's why like all those hippie communes always collapse, right? Because there's always free riders. There's always some guy that goes, yeah, man, I want to help in the field, but like, I'm kind of ripping a bong load right now and I want to be chill, bro. It's like, why aren't you respecting my individuality? They go, because we're feeding you, asshole. But that's not the communist way, right? So they kind of mistake like, hey, we're going to apply communal thinking to a market process, and that's why those collapse. But it's the same thing that happened in the libertarian communities. Like my podcast partner Fritz was talking about like a libertarian walked into the woods and met a bear or something like that. There's a book. There's like some libertarian community that kind of cropped up and it just sort of collapsed and didn't work because, hey, guess what? Like this voluntary, like we're all going to agree to these unspoken rules that everyone is just magically supposed to follow without any enforcement mechanism. Like, okay, well, good luck with that. Like it just, that's not how that's not how human games get played, right? And what we are playing is a game. It's just a game with lethal consequences. So that's the sort of free riding thing. It's where you can kind of come in, get things for not doing anything, right? And if you have to pay in specie, that kind of, then it's either you're stealing or you're free riding. But that it elevates you to, you have to do something to get the resources to keep going, which is why there's so much free riding going on in the United States right now. Like if you just look around, every city in America especially in the blue states, is just overrun with people like sleeping on the street. They go, oh, they're homeless. I go, oh, they're bums. There's a difference. Like none of these people are like involuntarily homeless where they go, oh, I can't find a house and I was working it.
There are lethal consequences to the game, and it seems like the game gets much more complex, which actually like leads to less sort of lethal outcomes, I think, for random players.
Yeah.
Or NPCs, and the game's gotten a little bit more refined, and you kind of have to, less people could kind of have leverage over the system.
Right.
Maybe, Fiat affects that and warps that a little differently than if the system or the game, the way it's designed, had a leak-free money. But where I wanted to go with this is I wanted to get into greed.
You're going for the deep dive, man.
Yeah, no, this is interesting stuff. And
oh, thank you.
So when we think about greed, and maybe like you use Elon Musk as a great foil in the book, so maybe we could talk about Elon. I mean, is Elon greedy? I'll ask it like that. And
yeah. Well, I think it's a great question to ask, right? Because that's one of the problems with like the notion of greed is you kind of go, well, what does it mean to be greedy? And I kind of provide like dictionary definitions, like, well, taking more than you need and this and that and the other thing. Okay, well, define need. And I think it sounds very pedantic and I think it sounds very academic, and yet it matters if you're going to say, well, that person's greedy. And when you start talking, when you add in like the Randian sense of like, rational self-interest, and then what is this and what is that, it becomes a very convoluted topic. But like, if you looked at Elon Musk and you say, well, what's that guy worth? You go, $100 billion, $200 billion. Does he need all that? Well, based on who? I mean, he thinks he needs it, right? But how much of that is like liquid net worth? You go, I don't know. But what game is he playing? Because that's an argument. Like, is someone being greedy is a value judgment that you as an NPC and me as an NPC, or what I call resources. Like, if there are 2 chickens on the chicken farm and they go, hey, that chicken's taking way too much feed, that chicken's greedy. The farmer's looking at it and goes, he doesn't, whatever. Yeah, that chicken's smarter than you are, whatever. I mean, that he's not going to care. The farmer is there to get resources from you. The farmer wants you to produce eggs and meat. And if you don't produce eggs and meat, he just kind of goes, you're not really worth anything to me. So he's going to chop you up and turn you into feed for the other chickens, or he's going to feed you the hogs, or however that works, right? But, so with Elon Musk, my sort of takeaway from whether or not he's greedy is I go, if you look at what the guy's doing in a competitive resource capture game, where the idea of the game, the concept of the game, the core purpose of the game is capture and control as much resources as you can. He controls a constellation of low Earth satellites. He controls the largest fleet of launch capable vehicles, like gravity escape velocity vehicles on planet Earth, and it's all under private control. He controls an infrastructure project in the Boring Machine. He controls an energy grid project in the solar company, whatever it's called, Tesla Energy. He also is a major auto manufacturer, so he controls light industry and potentially getting into heavy industry if you count SpaceX. So what kind of resources are under this guy's control? Oh my God. Defense, communications, public and private infrastructure, light and heavy industry. Huh. Well, is he greedy or is he rich? No, he's just playing the game. He's capturing resources as quick as he can. He's pretty clever at it, and he's really, really good at it. But at the end of it, you go, well, I hope this guy is benevolent, because good grief, he's got a lot of power, right? He wields extraordinary power. And I don't think people have quite realized what he's amassed yet. There are huge fans of Elon Musk. I was talking to Dominic Frisby at BTC Prague, and he's a big Elon Musk fan. I think Frisby is hilarious. I mean, he's a really brilliant thinker. Yeah. And, I was talking to him about Musk, and I go, well, you got to understand that guy controls the internet now, effectively. He will. Within 5 to 10 years, like, all network communications are going to route through Starlink. No, that couldn't happen. Why would that? Verizon's got all these cables and this, that, and the other thing. Okay, well, Starlink, for them to upgrade, they have to do a software upgrade. They have to launch a few more satellites. They're launching a few hundred a week. Pretty soon there's going to be 50,000 of those things floating around. And if you're Verizon and you look at your balance sheet and you say, well, we've got to do I don't know, $4.6 billion in infrastructure upgrades just to keep up with Starlink. But then they patch a new upgrade and go, oh shit, now we got to do another 10 billion just to keep up with his speeds, and we'll never reach most of his customers. What are we going to do? Well, Elon called and said, you guys can just lease access to Starlink and you can keep selling Verizon as a service and you can still be collecting checks. You just have to do a premium. I'll give you a network access and you just route all your traffic through me. Like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. Like, we don't have to lay any cable. We just make money. Yep. Cool. And AT&T, same thing. And, you know, whoever else, T-Mobile, and every single telecommunications, anybody that's passing data around the planet. If you have to do terrestrial infrastructure, that doesn't make any sense if there's a pipeline right above your head that's like just as fast, just as quick, and upgrades faster than you can even come up with a proposal for the board. So pretty soon, unless you're just a baboon that is just dead set on creating fiber lines all around the world, you just eventually drift to Starlink. And I think Elon Musk is aware of this. I mean, because once you see it, you can't unsee it. You go, oh yeah, of course that makes sense, right? But that also puts one guy in charge of all global telecommunications. Is that powerful? Ooh. Yeah, I think so. I think that's probably a pretty big effing deal. And he happens to also reside in a country where he's rabble-rousing like crazy and, you know, pushing for like all kinds of like America First stuff. And I go, of course, because this is your power base. And if you can acquire power within the power structure that is currently dominating the global monetary network, wow, you got a powerful 1-2 punch there. We control all communications and the money. So welcome to America, suckers. Right? Plus, he's got military capabilities. He's deeply embedded with the military industrial complex. So, like, if you, Cedric, tomorrow wanted to build a launch capable vehicle, like an escape velocity vehicle in your backyard, and then go send it up into space, there's going to be some people coming by in suits going like, hi, Cedric, we're here from all sorts of places that are going to talk to you about your little project here and what you think you're trying to do. And no. So somehow he's managed to just be launching these all the time, and he's kind of navigated all that weird regulatory hurdles and things like that. So now he is very much a player on the board. We are NPCs, we are resources, we are things that are being extracted from. He is a guy that is doing the extracting. So he's one of the sovereigns in the world right now that controls vast amounts of resources and is becoming increasingly powerful. So part of the point of that little treatise on Elon Musk is to go, hey, it's fun to talk about greed and who's being greedy, who's not being greedy, and capitalism drives greed and this, that, and the other thing. But that's not the purpose of the game, is to like just randomly hoard things. There are people that exhibit those traits and peacock around with Lamborghinis and, yo, I'm crypto bro, whatever. And I got, look, check out my rings, check out my stuff, you know. But those guys aren't, they're just like peacocking. That's like a chicken running around the chicken farm with, you know, really brilliant feathers, and the farmer still doesn't care. He goes, well, you're going to give me meat and eggs sooner or later, dude. Doesn't matter what you're dressed like. You're still meat and eggs to me. But right now, like if Elon Musk started as one of the chickens, now he's standing there in overalls with a pitchfork and he holds a bunch of land. He's going, well, not a chicken anymore, guys. You know, I'm one of you now. So that's kind of where part of that was going. But a lot of it just traces back to like even the old, you know, like the English hierarchies, and it was touching a little bit on the idea of natural law. Like this is in accordance with the laws of nature. And I think people say that a lot, like, oh, it's just the law of nature, right? Well, what does that mean? Well, back in the day, that actually had a meaning in the 1800s. They said, well, the laws of nature say that each object has an essence, a character, and that object has to adhere to its character. A rock has to be a rock because that's its nature. And obviously that sounds absurd and preposterous to anybody today. You know, well, what are you talking about? A rock is because of, you know, chemicals and chemical bonds and, you know, spooky interference at a distance and whatever physics that are coming into play to what makes a rock a rock. They certainly wouldn't say it has a characteristic ordained by God that it's trying to live up to as a rock. But if you start extrapolating that out to like, well, how come there are people that are like the gentry that control like vast tracts of land in England, but there are peasants that work that field? Well, that's the laws of nature. You know, the laws of nature dictate that there are some people that are born to be leaders and they're just doing leadership things because that's their nature. That's in their nature. That's ordained by God. You can't change it. They just have to do leader things. And there are some people that are just born to be workers. So those people are just adhering to the laws of nature. And it's a toxic idea if you allow it to propagate, but people still say it to this day. You go, it's just the laws of nature. They don't even think about what they're saying because it sounds intuitive. It sounds, oh yeah, of course. We all understand nature. We all understand what the law of nature is. The law of nature says that, but they don't. Because you ask them to define it. It's the same problem. I can't remember what psychologist wrote the paper. It said, hey, ask anybody, do you know how a zipper works? And they go, oh, of course. Yeah. Okay. Describe it. And they go, well, there's a thing, it's like a tab, and then the things like go together. I go, yeah, but how does it work? And I go, I guess I don't know how the zipper works, right? But it sounds absurd until you try and spell it out. And I think it's the same thing is true with the law of nature or money or power or greed or any of this stuff. I go, okay, well, how does that work? And they go, well, they just end up stumped. And so they might reach for their first thing that they heard in their college textbook and, back in 1976 or whatever. But I think these concepts deserve unpacking just because if we're going to try and understand the world we're in, and especially if we are truly a bunch of NPCs or just resources, and we all have access to this amazing property right called Bitcoin, it might behoove us to understand the game that we're actually playing and what that thing means and why it's important and why we should preserve it and cherish it and all those sort of things I think come out. I think they're less so if you stay in the matrix, or at least most of the time in the matrix, because you want to eat your steak. And, I just want to have a steak, like that kind of attitude, I think permeates the Bitcoin space. And I'd like to see that sort of shift a little bit more to the tangible meat space of the game we're actually playing and where it's headed and why.
Yeah. And maybe what is good about the game and what is the game holding together? Maybe we don't want to get rid of the whole game. Just maybe put different water through the pipes. So then, let's look at free will and choice, but let's look at it through the lens of the Federal Reserve. Okay. And sort of like good and evil. I mean, do you subscribe to the Jekyll Island theory that, a few people got together with all the power they've amassed and were like, we're just going to bend all the rules to our will so that we can hoard and collect resources and put everyone under our spell?
I do not. I mean, it puts me at odds with like a lot of Bitcoin sort of dogma, for lack of a better term, right? But like, I see a lot of Bitcoin, you got to read Jekyll Island, this will change your mind. And, but I also know the history of the Federal Reserve, right? And I cite a paper in there, and you could actually, like the guy that wrote that paper was there when the Federal Reserve was being created. And so were there powerful people that got together and tried to figure out a problem? Yes, absolutely, 100%. Were they an evil cabal of lizard people that were secretly trying to figure out how to control everything from their little retreat on Jekyll Island? To go, that's more of a stretch than otherwise. There was a big problem with like, how do we redeem greenbacks back in the day? Why don't we just go back to a silver standard? Why don't we have a bimetal standard? And this was a Republican talking point back then, and they would just never pull the trigger because it implicated too many other problems. So they had all these problems of like, how do we pay for the war debts? How do we get this thing working? Our banking system is absolute and utter chaos. It's a complete shit show. Like we've got wildcat banks showing up all the time. They just go bankrupt. Like it wrecks all these people. Like nobody knows what the hell they're doing. But it kind of reminds me like the banking system in the United States in the 1800s was a lot like the crypto ecosystem today. It's just like, yeah, we just do shit and and we're worth $1 billion. Okay, cool. Okay, we're worth zero. Like, wait, what? How'd that happen? Like, well, because like math and things and other things happen, and this guy did this, and then this, but it was all vapor to begin with. But that was like every wildcat bank back in the day. So you never knew what was like a quality project or a not quality project, and all of them were trash, just like they're all shitcoins now. So they're trying to solve that problem because you can't have this sort of bifurcated federalist system. Or not even bifurcated, but just like fractured federalist system with all these different people pulling all these different directions and not have like a uniform currency. But you can't do that with the fractured federal system because of reasons and problems there. And you've got this collective war debt that you're trying to figure out how to redeem and make it so the whole country doesn't go bankrupt. And we don't want another banking crisis and yada, yada. How do we weave this little thing? I've got it. What if we did XYZ? We peg gold to these pieces of paper, but we're going to back it from this thing that's a separate entity from the feds because we can't really do it under the Constitution because that wouldn't really work. But I think we can pull this off. What do you guys think? You go, yeah, that sounds like a pretty good idea. Well, but we'll make sure it's like independent from the political body. Yeah. So there's no chance of manipulation. Yeah, it's a great idea, Tom. Good job. But they're always throughout all of these Like, how do you manage your resources, right? The chicken will look at the farmer and go, this farmer's doing these things because he's part of the evil cabal of farmers that all do farmer things because they want to squeeze more eggs out of us. But the farmer has a very different point of view. The farmer's like, well, shit, man. Like, all of Tom's chickens had to get culled last year, and that kind of sucked. And we want to avoid that here. So we got to give all these chickens a shot. But the chickens get really pissy and they don't make enough eggs. So if we give them another shot, they'll make more eggs. They go, see what they're doing? You see what they're doing to us? They're trying to control us. And you go, well, yeah, they're trying to make sure you keep producing eggs. Like, that's all they care about. They don't care about like is this fair? Like that. Those are rules for the NPCs to interact. But just like a player running through a game with NPCs, you don't like if you bowl an NPC over with your car in Grand Theft Auto, you go, oh my god, the poor NPC. But if there was an NPC coalition, it was like, this is unfair. The guy that's playing the game is always running us down. We need to come up with a rule that he can't run us down anymore. But the player's just gonna like if the player really likes running down, NPCs, he's just I found a hack around that. I'm just going to squish you this way. So that's kind of my analogy there. It might be a loose, terrible analogy, but if you're talking about people that are in control of resources and how they are extracting value from those resources, how are they maximizing the productivity of those resources? I think through trial and error, they figured out, hey, if we get these people to trade and we get these people kind of fat and happy, they get way more productive, which means we control way more stuff. That's pretty neat. Like that gives us more power because we have more things. So let's keep encouraging that. And if we screw that up, then, well, shoot, we'll try and figure out a different way to keep that resource capture game going. But it also provides a new surface area for attack because in the maximization of resources, there's this other group of people goes, hey, you see, this is unfair, right? What we can fix that. We have the solution. It's called communism or socialism or whatever. So they all they do is provide a new lever for a new resource capture guy to come in. So the people that are running the thing goes, hey, we make people super productive by keeping them busy and making them make widgets and ding dongs and things and making them fat and happy. That makes us rich. But now they're so rich that they're really pissed off about how they don't have more widgets and ding dongs because they feel like they're just working way too much by pushing email at the office this week. So this other group of people is now trying to take power from us. So how about we just adopt some of the things those power capturing guys are trying to do? But we'll give you Social Security, but so there's just like this iterative process where people are just weaving the halls of power, trying to maintain their structural control over the resources under their domain. The trouble with communism is it doesn't work because it's based on a market system, right? So you can't come in and do communal, just like the hippie communes didn't work. It doesn't work on a nation state level. It doesn't work any better with scale. And it just misallocates things. It collapses. And then it devolves right back down to, guess what? Gangs, chaos. The gangs come into power. They seize control of the resources. If they're benevolent and smart, they marshal those resources effectively. They start funneling those resources back down so they can make their people fat and happy again, so they can make them more productive. That's Russia. Right. I mean, it's like it was painted right in front of everybody. They can see it unfold right in front of them. They go, what happened? Well, they were this sort of pseudo peasant, market economy with a legacy monarch. The communists came in and seized power, and then they drove everything into the ground and starved like 40 million people, and that kind of sucked ass. And so, of course, that collapsed because nobody wants to keep doing that. So who took over? Well, all the people that were amassing power behind the scenes in communist land, because that's what happens with any power seizure. Doesn't matter if you're capitalist, communist, socialist, whatever. Power is going to flow up. Resources flow up, period. Capitalism is kind of neat in a way because it also allows resources to flow back down and around. So everyone gets a little more fat and happy, but the people at the top get really fabulously rich. The communists come in and they just get fabulously rich by extracting what's left amongst the plebs, and then they starve and get pissed, and then somebody else comes in and starts the game over again. They come in and go, hey, this thing's all broken now. Everyone's rioting in the streets. There's bread lines. Nobody has anything. It's fucking chaos. Everybody hates it. I'm here to fix that. How are you going to do that? Well, all my thugs are going to go around and bash the shit out of anybody that does anything we don't like. And then we're going to, iron fist this thing back into coherence. If that happens in Cuba, you end up with Fidel Castro. If it happens in Russia, a nuclear armed peer, it turns into Russia, right? Where you go, hey, we kind of got the vestiges of a market economy. We've kind of got some semblance of the order has been restored for the most part throughout Russia. It's not quite as advanced as like if you went to Vienna, Austria or something like that, but it's not nearly as backwards as if you went to Albania. So it kind of works, but they're also a nuclear armed peer. So that gives them a lot more latitude to effectuate actual changes that benefit the populace. And now we're right back to the power structure, power games, power plays. And, right now, like those little trade things like the trade deal with India and cutting off, India, you can trade with us and we'll cut all the tariffs as long as you don't buy Russian oil. Like, it's all power plays. They're just going right back to the levers they can pull, because they can't go and just make Russia do stuff, because Russia will blow us up. They have nukes. They just go, hey, you need to stop invading Ukraine, or what? Just like your buddy in the cab. You going to kick us out? No. Well, I guess we can be here then, right? Like, right. Hey, Russia, you need to knock that off, or what? Well, we're going to make it so you can't use our money. That's fine. We'll go around it. Are you going to invade? No, then go fuck yourself, right? Like, they don't care because they have nukes. So that's the sort of game that's getting played. And I think Bitcoin changes it all,
Yeah, we'll get to that. I want to read a little bit more from the book.
Of course. Thank
Ultimately,
you.
Understanding the process of making a decision is arguably far less impactful than the results of the decisions that are made. Nevertheless, the biggest problem with all the various and varied economic theories is the niggling little problem of falsifiability. For those unfamiliar, the idea revolves around the criterion for scientific inquiry put forth by Sir Karl Popper that says a theory can only be truly be scientific if it is possible to prove false. It would be a near impossibility to, for instance, falsify the concept of subjective expected utility. It would be impossible because there would always be an observable instance of someone behaving according to that criteria and no objective way to disprove the cause of the behavior. Put in a more disparaging light, it seems to me the entire field of economics more appropriately belongs in the realm of the metaphysical inquiry rather than any scientific one. What is readily observable, however, is the ability for an actor to be able to reliably and repeatedly modify the behavior of another actor by altering their incentives. Give me one of your pigs or I will bash your head in is a brutish but simple example of incentive modification. Of course, one could fritter about extolling the process of this economic actor determining the subjective expected utility of not getting conked on the head versus giving up a pig. The observable reality is there is a high likelihood of compliance with that demand, which only increases with the credibility of the threat. Moreover, there is also an observable reality that says a select few will resist, perhaps to their serious detriment, and then again, perhaps not. Indeed, it is quite possible they will prevail. The broad point being much of the behavior explored by the economists and philosophers is likely closer to gambling than anything else. As a gambler finds in a casino, the house has a number of incentives they can use to encourage or retard the behavior of their patrons. Indeed, many of those incentive structures have been well documented and researched. An infamous and related example even ended up as the subject of a Nevada Gaming Commission court case. The core structure of the casino environment is one that is constructed entirely with gambler incentives in mind. Everything from the decor to the food to the floor design and lighting and everything in between. They are all crafted to incentivize gamblers to stay as long as possible, even when they are broke or tired or indeed spending their next month's rent. Keeping in mind, of course, that this environment is built within the confines of enormous structures that clearly cost a lot of money to build and maintain, meaning everyone who walks through the door is or should be immediately unnoticed that the profit margins are clearly high enough to warrant these exorbitant expenses and that the money in their pocket is the only possible source of those profits. Within the discussion at hand, when we are talking about greed and the human structures of power and money, there is a distinct line of scholarship devoted to the idea that the entire pseudo-capitalist structure underpinning the global political economy is really nothing more than a giant casino. Unlike a walk-in casino, however, the global political economy casino is not one we can simply leave. Rather, the opposite is true. And the sovereign, your sovereign, demands that we all both play and pay under penalty of death. As Susan Strange writes in Casino Capitalism, the Western financial system is rapidly coming to resemble nothing as much as a vast casino. Everyday games are played in this casino that involve sums of money so large that they cannot be imagined. At night, the games go on at the other side of the world. In the towering office blocks that dominate all the great cities of the world, rooms are full of chain-smoking young men all playing these games. Their eyes are fixed on computer screens flickering with changing prices. They play by intercontinental telephone or by tapping electronic machines. They are just like the gamblers in casinos watching the clicking spin of a silver ball on a roulette wheel. It is perhaps disingenuous to relegate the entirety of the global political economy to the ranks of a vast 24-hour casino, but the underlying logic may certainly help explain some of the madness that is otherwise attributed to the nefarious secret cabals of lizard people. The reason this underlying logic may prove helpful relates to a notion many find quite troubling, the notion that much of what passes for success may in fact be more attributable to simply getting lucky. Yeah, I thought that was really fascinating and a really great way to sum up sort of how we're all trying to operate within the game, but there's so much we can't see. It reminds me a lot of Fight Club in a way,
Yeah.
you know, and everyone's trying to like figure out their way, but there's just so much unknown, and you can only play by the rules that you know. You try to break the rules. You try to figure out what you can get away with, what you can't get away with, how much power you have in the system.
Right.
And it's really interesting, the people that just kind of intuit this and live it out and find themselves in these positions of power almost unbeknownst to themselves, how they got there.
Well, it's a fascinating world just in the regard that we've relegated like the success of combat down to things like the success of the spoken word, right? And one of the things I would point out to people, I used to work in the prison system briefly, and I would talk to some of the young people and I would say, you have to understand, like, it's your ability to convey an idea that can grant you enormous power in this world. And it's just the same thing as the shot caller at the top of your gang that you're rolling with, as it is for the shot caller at the CEO of JP Morgan Chase, right? That guy didn't walk in and go, look how hard I can work. Look how many holes I can dig. Look how many, buttons I can push. That guy comes in and goes, hey, I can put people together. I can convince people to give us money, and I can convince other people to help us make that into more money. That's it. Can you do that effectively? Yeah, well, you go up the ranks. Can you not do it effectively? Then you're going to toil. Right. So it's your ability to orate anymore that kind of grants you access to a lot of power in a fiat system, which is a sort of unfortunate disconnect from on one level of like, well, back in the day, you would have had to survive at least a couple of tournaments and maybe, chop a guy's leg off in combat before you could actually even get a chance to sit at the table. Now you just got to go chop a guy's head off in the back office by like, spreading a bad rumor about him or something. I don't know. But, it kind of, it relegates us to the world of slimes and people that are really Machiavellian in a lot of ways, and it rewards that kind of behavior. But that's the problem of an extractive system that is so sort of concretely manifested now. I mean, it's really, really, in a way, it's super easy to navigate this system and you can make bloody fortune from chaos. But in other ways, it limits a lot of people who just don't think that way and don't want to operate that way, And while the United States may have been predicated on the idea of the human farmer, that idea went out the window like the year after the country was born, right? They started recognizing the problems there already. And people come in and start going, hey, there's a bunch of cool shit here I want to try and control. Because that's my job. I'm a player in the game of competitive resource capture. There are no rules to this game, so I'm going to try and capture these resources. They can have a little piece of paper that says they're supposed to have this, that, and the other thing. I don't give a shit about your piece of paper. I'm not playing according to your piece of paper. I'm playing according to the games of resource capture. Resource capture says, if you can do it, it's valid. If you can't do it, you lose, right? But that's straight out of Game of Thrones. It's a game you play and either you win or you die, right? And that's sort of the game of competitive resource capture. It always has been. You have to risk a little bit. You have to be conniving. You have to be cunning. And if you can figure out how to wield enough force or leverage or power, then you get to control resources. You get to play the game, and you get to become vulnerable to the people that are trying to take the resources from you. So round and round you go. I don't know why people want to play this game. It kind of doesn't make sense to me. I mean, I get it on some level, like, well, I don't have to deal with the plebs all the time. But on the other level, it's like you said, you go from here are my enemies, I'm fighting to get somewhere. By the time you get there, now all the enemies are right behind you. And you go, oh shit, now what? Now I got to stay here? This is a pain in the ass. Can I just retire? Nope, that doesn't work. There are a handful of people who get to ride off into the sunset, but not many, and most end up. So when it comes to the cabals of lizard people, there is some semblance of an idea of like, well, there are people that have been playing this game for so long, for so many generations, that they've got it refined to such a point that they go, well, we're not really exposing ourselves to any of the dangers and the risks of resource capture. We're still funding things. We still pull levers here and there. We still kind of maneuver in the background. But to give them so much agency that they just control things, I think overstates their ability, right? Because there's still people that take a dump. They got to put their socks on every day. They get a head cold. And they make dumb decisions, and they have layers of decisions underneath them that prevent them from catastrophically screwing up. But they're still influencing the game, but no more than Elon Musk is, right? Or no more than the public figures that you know about. To say that somehow Elon Musk has got puppet strings behind him and it's some shadowy person with lizard blood that, drinks baby juice, or I don't know what the hell these people are accused of anymore, I think provides too much, weight to their ability, which I'm kind of being repetitive now, but yeah.
No, that's great. And all right, so let's, there is a really interesting anecdote here about a sort of particular court case versus the Long Island Railroad system. And that's kind of my neck of the woods. But it really kind of gets into sort of causality versus causation, and what really, like, you know, and so like that, it's a wild case. You know, a couple people are getting on a train. Second person like lunges to get on the train. He's getting pushed from a guard behind who's trying to help him on. He's getting pulled on. He drops his package. Fireworks go off. They were in the package. People get hurt. You know, what really caused this? Was it the person who pushed him on the train? The person who pulled him on the train? Was it his efforts to get on the train? Was it that he was late to the train? You know, and really, you know, that was kind of interesting. But I want to get into the title of the book, The Great Alignment and Bitcoin here. So what problem do you see Bitcoin trying to solve?
Well, you know, oddly enough, I think Bitcoin is neutral in what it is trying to do, right? Like, I don't provide any agency to Bitcoin. I just recognize what it has become. And so Michael Saylor used to talk a lot about like Bitcoin is property, and it alleviates the problems of calling it money. I don't know. I've never really asked. I haven't sat down for a coffee with Michael Saylor to go, hey, what do you think about it? Was this what you meant by that? You know, but I think he's speaking from a financial standpoint. I think from a purely like we exist in a fiat system, it's a recognition of the reality of the situation that all of us find ourselves in. We don't live in a system where you can just opt out, right? Like that's not a possibility. Maybe on some very limited scale, but even the people that quote unquote opt out are not truly opting out because they go and I'm going to go build a bunker in the woods in Montana. Okay, well, what happens when your tractor breaks? Well, I'm just going to go on Amazon real quick and get some. You didn't really opt out of the system, did you? I mean, are you building your own parts? And there is a guy out there that's got open source parts to how to build a tractor and all this crazy shit. But even that guy, you go, well, where'd you get the steel? Well, it's scrap steel. So that just magically appeared. Was there a scrap steel tree that you harvested that from? Or was that something that came from the fiat system? Well, yeah, of course. But I mean, you have to go, well, of course, but you have to. And that, so those are all these qualifiers about like I've opted out, but I'm really part of the system. I don't have to do the parts I don't like is all that's really sort of saying. And they kind of miss out on all the kind of cool things. Like it's kind of cool to be able to just go to a store and walk around and go, hey, that's a pretty fresh looking piece of fruit. Neat. I'm just going to eat that, you know. But there was a guy that I'm going to deviate just a little bit here, but there was a guy that went to live with the Hazda for a few months. He was talking to Joe Rogan. He said, these guys are like animals, dude. Like these guys can just like run all day. Like I'm out there just dying, you know, and like, and they go, hey, we're going to go hunt. And he said, well, what do I do? What do you mean you don't know how to hunt? Are you going to skin that? I don't know how to skin a badger or whatever it is you just killed. And so the translator's going, no, you don't understand. Where he comes from, there's people that kill his meat for him and cut it off. Like, what? This guy's a grown man. Like, how does that happen, you know? So I apologize for the deviation there. We were talking about
The Great Realignment. What problem is Bitcoin
yeah. What problem does
solve?
it solve? Thank you. Thank you for getting me back on track. What I look at when he says it's property, Michael Saylor, that is, rather than money, I look at the problem from a different point of view. I say, well, money, if my thesis proves correct, if it is predatory monetarism that started the money to begin with, that's the origin story of money, then why would we want quote unquote sound money? Well, that implies that you want to continue being a farm animal. You just want your taxes to be fair so you can't get diluted. Well, that's an outcome that's probably not that bad in the grand scheme of things. When I hear the ANCAPs, the anarcho-capitalists or whatever, say, hey, we smashed the state, we're just going to do voluntary contracts, I go, good luck with that, dude. Like, have you never played a game of softball on the weekend with a bunch of competitive bros that are drinking beer? Because that's a kind of resource capture game. You know, it's all a fiction, right? You got to run around home base. But those guys will duke it out. Like, I've seen guys get in fistfights at company softball games because, like, they're breaking the rules and doing all that kind of stuff. So you think you're going to somehow magically create a society that everyone's just going to agree on your unspoken honor code system and you're not going to end up in a power hierarchy somehow? It's impossible, right? So those things devolve. When states collapse, it's ugly. And, you know, to any anarcho-capitalists that are going to poo-poo on my idea here, I go, well, Somalia is wide open, dude. You can just move there anytime you want and go set up your anarcho-capitalist utopia, see how far it goes. He goes, no. Well, we're only going to set it up when there's a state there to make sure that everything's peaceful so we can come in and do our thing. Well, then you're just LARPing at that point, right? okay, we're going to go amass an army. Well, as soon as we convince enough people that we want to move to Somalia to create the libertarian anarcho-capitalist utopia, we're all going to move to Somalia and invade. Good luck with that, dude. Like, you got all kinds of problems on the road down there. So I think there is some role for the state is what I'm kind of ultimately getting to. And the idea that we get to keep all the benefits of the fiat system, we get to keep all the trappings, we get to keep all the comforts, the creature comforts, the thing that makes the Hazda laugh at us and go, wait, there's people that cut your meat for you? Like, what are you talking about? That's crazy. For us to continue enjoying those things, they come from a fiat system. They didn't come from just automagically. They didn't just get created out of thin air. They were created under state control, sovereign authority, and people competing for power and control over resources, and then managing those resources and trying to extract from them. That's how we ended up with iPhones and this thing that we're talking on right now and all that kind of stuff. But I think if you treat Bitcoin as property, it's a very different conversation, because that is the cornerstone of the resource capture game. You are trying to capture resources. That's property. That's land, oil, trees, people. Those are things that you want in the resource capture game. If there is a resource that you can't capture, that changes how you play that game. And I say that because it gives an opportunity now for you as an individual to take a semblance of sovereignty unto yourself. Meaning that you have a property that can't be debased, it can't be taken, it can't be stolen, and it allows you to integrate into the sovereign system, benefit from the sovereign, luxuries that we all get from this, and the sovereign conveniences and the sovereign comforts. Well, Bitcoin as property, I think, adds a neat layer, because it allows people, like, whether it's a company, a person, all the way up to the sovereign, it gives them a vehicle by which they can survive in a system that is dependent upon continual debasement, right? The system doesn't survive. We don't get all this neat stuff without continual debasement. And there's some academic literature that says, hey, there is a preferred rate of debasement of 2 or 3%. And people that would otherwise be considered like sound money people have been accused of saying things like, well, 2% debasement is a pretty good idea. 3% debasement. They kind of dicker on how much debasement is good or not good. The chartalists that branched off into the MMT world say, well, like, unlimited debasement is fine, but I think they're kind of missing the point as well. So what Bitcoin does is it kind of gives you an opportunity to sort of allow the fiat system to kind of gradually reorient itself, if that makes sense.
So, yeah, I mean, I really think that it really changes the way you think about Bitcoin. I'm really trying to digest sort of this idea of money sort of coming from top down and the problem it's solved. And just that the way this game is structured and how we operate within the game and the confines, not the confines in terms of power or authority, but in sort of knowledge. Right. And understanding where we are in the game and who knows what and what is actual sort of what we don't know. Right. That's the struggle in the game in a lot of ways. Sure. And sort of the unpredictability of our actions then mixing with unknown happenstance around us. Yeah. So to wrap it up, though, I do also want to touch on MicroSeed.
Yeah, we can chat about it a little bit.
Well, thinking about everything we've talked about, you've decided to channel your energy into securing the seed phrase. Mm-hmm. So sort of where did you come up with the idea of tackling that?
Well, that was sort of a selfish invention. For those who aren't aware, MicroSeed lets you record all 24 words of your Bitcoin seed phrase on a single 1-inch titanium or stainless steel washer. At the time when I was making it, it was right after I had used a competitor's product, and I kind of banged my fingers, and it took me a long time to do it, and I screwed up the text a couple of times, and I was really frustrated with the whole process. And it was also a thing that kind of sat on my coffee table for like 3 weeks, and I was just like, oh, I should really do that. And I just wouldn't do it, right? So when I finally banged the thing out, I was like sitting on a concrete floor in the garage because it didn't work on my kitchen table. I wasn't able to make deep enough impressions on the thing. So my girlfriend's coming out looking at me like, you look like an orangutan, dude. Like, what are you doing? I was like, gotta get the seed phrase in the titanium, So it was a little, and like I said, I bashed my finger. I hadn't hit myself with a hammer in 20 years, right? So it was a little frustrating there. I mean, it wasn't like I didn't get injured or anything, but it was just like one of those, like kind of like when you bite your cheek kind of thing. So, but when I was all done with the whole thing, I looked at it and well, what if I wanted to take this on a plane? Like, what if I had to like flee the country? What am I going to do with this damn thing? Like, am I going to put that in my checked luggage? Like, that's a terrible idea. Like some TSA guy snooping through there goes, oh, I know what that is. Sweet. Yoink, mine now, so I end up in, I flee to Paraguay or whatever, and I go, where's my seed phrase? I don't know, but there's a big piece of tape around your bag that says inspected by TSA. Like, shit. Am I going to put it in my pocket? I don't think that's going to pass security. Maybe I'll get through, but they route me through the little millimeter wave thing. I go, hey, what's that in your pocket? I go, you don't need to see that. Yeah, I think I do, sir. And they might let you pass, and who knows, maybe they don't notice. Maybe you put it in your little carry-on bag and the TSA guy's just asleep that day and it just lets it go by. I mean, they let guns go by all the time, so why not your seed phrase? But I don't want to roll the dice on it, right? And I always sort of was not fond of the stack of DIY washers kind of thing where you just, I'm going to go to Home Depot, I'm going to get a screw and a bolt, or a bolt and a wing nut, and then I'm going to buy a bunch of washers. I'm going to bang this thing out like a chimp on the floor. Partly because you just end up with a roll of quarters in your pocket everywhere you go. And I go, well, good luck taking that on a plane too. And I mean, yeah, you can divide up your seed phrase into like 40 different, you can spread it around through your bag, or maybe no one's going to notice a big bag of washers in the bottom of your bag, or any number of like ideas, right? And you could probably get it through. But again, it was one of those things like, well, what if the security is really tight at the border? Like, let's say there really was some sort of financial collapse and hey, heaven forbid, the banks are all shut and you can't get anything going. You go, oh, that's a problem. Well, I want to leave the country and I want to walk to Paraguay. So I'd kind of like to be able to go to the airport, and I got a passport and I got enough on this card that they'll still let me buy a ticket because I have a passport already, even though the government's shut down. So you can't get a new one. So if you're thinking about leaving, now you're kind of stuck. But me, I was super smart and I had my passport ready and I just packed a little bag and said, oh, it's just a business trip. I'll be right back as soon as you guys figure out this mess that you created. Sorry. But what if they're going, well, we just want to make sure you're not taking any crypto out of the country, just in case. I mean, you're coming back anyway, right, Mr. White? So no worries there. But just in case you're not, got like a Trezor or anything on you? Because we're going to check real hard. And I go, not me. What about like a stack of washers? No, I would never do that. So if I got my seed phrase stamped into a nylon washer, which we also offer, and I sew that into my clothes, or I swallow it, or I, bolt it to the handle of my bag, they go, can you find that little 1-inch nylon washer? No, 0 chance. I mean, they potentially, if they were like decided we're going to cut every thread of everything that you're carrying down to its fundamentals, maybe they'll find the washer, and then maybe they'll decipher that there's words on it, and then maybe they'll decipher that that's a Bitcoin seed phrase. I think that's pretty unlikely. Not saying it's impossible, but but the thing is, if you literally went, wow, they're cutting people's clothes off and they're cutting them down to the threads, I should probably swallow this washer, and now I'm going to get on the plane. Can they find it then? Well, if they're willing to follow you around for 3 days with a bucket, maybe. Otherwise, no. That's going to pass body scan. Like they're going to get you in a body scanner and look, and they're going to go, nope, I don't see any metal. I don't see anything that very clearly stands out as something that shouldn't be in a human body right now. There's like this little blurry thing, but that could be a turd for all I know. I've used a body scanner. I know what they look like. I know what the scans look like, and I know the limitations, and I know that thing is not going to show up unless, it's possible. But even then, you go, what's that? You go, oh my God, it was so stupid. I was at a bar the other night. My buddies bet me I wouldn't swallow the washer. So I said, hell yeah, I'll swallow the washer. And the guy said he'd give me $100 if I swallowed this washer. So I swallowed it. It's rusty. What? You swallowed a rusty washer? Yeah. I'm a moron. Okay, well, that's pretty dumb. See you later, Tom. Have a nice flight. Whatever. So the point being is I wanted a way to like easily conceal this thing, easily carry it, easily take it around with me. And with the MicroSeed, you can do things like you can cover up the one washer you've stamped with like Plastidip, which is like a tool handle coating. You can put it in a wax stamp. You can hide that washer anywhere a washer can go. And I think that's probably a better way to like hide very valuable information, is like make it super small and very, very discreet. And that was the impetus and birth of MicroSeed. It was very selfish innovation.
Yeah, I love it. What I really like about it, the transportability is great, but the really discreet nature of it. So there's a lot of discussion about, should you put it in metal? Should you leave it on paper? A lot of people say no to paper. Paper almost becomes like kind of like counterintuitive, and so it's kind of good in a way. Like, oh, you would never leave your phrase right in this piece of paper right in the top drawer of your desk, right?
Right.
Well, where this kind of is a happy marriage is because it's one washer. The washer could be in your refrigerator. Right. Yeah. It could be the washer holding your, the
the handle to your bag on your suitcase. So it could be in places so conspicuous, so right in front of everybody,
Right.
that it's hidden,
Yeah.
in plain sight in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
So that's what I really love about it.
Oh, thank you.
And you're not buying, just to clarify, you're not getting a washer. You're getting the thing that makes gives you the ability to stamp the washer.
Correct.
And endless amounts of washers.
Yes.
So what I like about that too is you could have it in all this discrete places. Because again, it's back to like, well, if you have your seed phrase on a very like obvious piece of metal in your safe deposit box, that is a form of an attack vector.
Oh yeah.
You know, it'd be a lot more discreet if you had a box in your safe deposit box with a bunch of feathers in it, and the box had a washer in it holding it together. And so, like, why are there a bunch of feathers here? And no one would have any, further. Well, I guess he likes feathers, and they're really important in his family.
Well,
this guy's got nothing.
Yeah,
he's
a bum.
Yeah. So I love the discrete nature of it, and sort of how much you can just hide it in plain sight. So
thank you.
I really appreciate your contributions to the scene, and it comes down to. Now a lot of people are calling it, it's called buy spot Bitcoin, but real Bitcoin. I think the reason we say spot Bitcoin is we don't want to scare people off and it's real and fake, whatever. But just go get yourself some real Bitcoin.
Right.
Put it in self-custody.
Yes.
And secure your seed phrase.
Yes.
For generations.
Absolutely.
So,
however
you can do that.
I'm a huge proponent of the self-custody model, precisely because of my understanding of Bitcoin as property, right? If you can control some sum of money, I think that makes you a powerful person, or can make you a powerful person, but that's not the ultimate sign of sovereignty, right? Like, the King of England didn't come to the New World and say, hey, capture all the wampum you can. He said, capture the land, capture the valuable thing, the property. And if you have valuable property that people can't access, I think that's a huge thing. My corollary to that, and my sort of secondary purpose, and I would actually argue it's my primary purpose. Like, I'm pleased as punch that people like the MicroSeed, and that it's becoming a popular device, and I'm excited as all get out to be part of the journey of people actually taking self-custody of their Bitcoin. But the far more important thing to me is that people run nodes, and I can't stress this enough. If you are a person like me that looks at Bitcoin and goes, hey, this is a novel invention. This is the first thing that's ever been invented by mankind in 12,000 years that is valuable and can't be stolen. Like, that fundamentally changes the game of that we've all been collectively playing or not being part of, being party to, for the last 12,000 years. It's a game of competitive resource capture. Powerful people come and try and control resources. Other powerful people try and take those resources back, and round they go. We are resources. So all we are good for to them is what can they extract from us. If we suddenly become people that control property that they want, that changes us fundamentally. That puts us, it doesn't necessarily elevate us to the same level as like a guy who controls all the low Earth constellation satellites, but it certainly puts us in a position of like, well, he has something we want, and he controls property. That's a big deal. We become that human farmer model that the United States is predicated on. We're just a small holder. We have a little chunk of property, but you can't really dominate us anymore because it's ours. You can't take it. So that's a big deal. And in order for that vision to be realized, the network has to remain decentralized and secure. This is a Jeff Booth point. He hammers it home all the time. Provided Bitcoin remains decentralized and secure, Bitcoin's going to transform the world. I agree with Jeff Booth 1,000%. As long as Bitcoin remains decentralized and secure, it's going to transform humanity for the better, whether you hold some or not. I think it's going to radically improve the world in a very short amount of time. But it's incumbent upon us that understand that to make sure that it stays decentralized and secure. Easiest, most powerful way to do that is to fire up a node and provide that nudge effect, provide that thing that is a bulwark against software changes you don't agree with, provide that bulwark against being co-opted by powerful financial interests. And BlackRock says in their prospectus, hey, we get to say what Bitcoin is. I go, not if there's 24 million nodes you don't. You might be able to wield that influence with 3,000 nodes, and most of them are controlled by corporations and exchanges, and most of the people that have Bitcoin, it's just another thing on their balance sheet. They go, gosh, I hope this goes up so I can buy a Lamborghini next year. But if there are 24 million plebs that go, no, we decide what Bitcoin is, not you. You can route your Kraken and your Coinbase nodes or whatever you want. We're going to tell you what Bitcoin is because we are the protocol. We are the people that decentralized this. We created it. We gave it value. And now we are going to make sure that you don't co-opt it. That's what the power of node running does. Not one, but collectively in the millions, in the tens of millions, in the hundreds of millions. if every person that has financial exposure to Bitcoin ran a node, and especially in the global south where we got some geographic diversity of the node location, Bitcoin quite literally is unstoppable. And once it's unstoppable, it fundamentally transforms the world for the better. So if you're hearing this, please, for the love of God, and you like Bitcoin, please, please, please consider running a node. It's not as hard as you think, and it absolutely helps defend the network. So that's my sales pitch. Buy a MicroSeed if you want, I don't care, but run a node, please.
Yeah, I really appreciate you hammering that home.
Thank you.
I think we're getting into dicey times here, and I think it's going to come down to running a node and holding your own keys and securing them. So I'll leave it to you for any parting words. Let people know where they can find you and your work and MicroSeed. And I'll definitely have to have you come back because I'd love to hear your take on some of how things are developing in the world and where we're going.
Oh, yeah. Well, Cedric, I would just say thank you so much. I mean, you've been such an incredibly generous host. Like we said in that little kind of interruption, I didn't expect that we'd have like a deep dive on this. So it's been really fun for me. I hope I didn't bore you to tears through all this kind of stuff. In terms of being able to find me, you can find me at Daniel21E15 on X. I rarely post there. Or you can find me at microseed_IO, and that's our sort of official Twitter account, which is also just me. But I interact a lot more there just because I'm, running the company now. So, but yeah, if you have an opportunity, please check out the MicroSeed. Check out the book. I'm not here to peddle a book. You can read it for free on Nostr. You can just follow the link from my homepage on Twitter. Or you can get a paperback if you like. I think it's an interesting read. I'm working on a new book now, so hopefully that'll be coming pretty soon, and I can tack on to some of the ideas I started in that one. So thank you so much, Cedric. I feel incredibly blessed to be part of your show. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Daniel. This has been so dope.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Bitcoin Matrix. If you enjoyed the conversation, don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop a comment below with any questions or thoughts you may have. We'd love to hear from you. You can support the show by checking out our sponsors and affiliate links in the description. It helps keep bringing you great content while connecting you with awesome products that I believe in. Share this episodes with your friends, family, or anyone curious about Bitcoin. And let's keep growing this community together. Stay curious, keep stacking, and I'll catch you in the next one.